Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very excited to welcome Jonathan Moore back to the podcast today to talk about Night of Dark Shadows, the sequel to House of Dark Shadows, released 50 years ago in August of 1971. How are we doing, Jonathan?
Well, as I said last time, we are back from the dead.
We are back from the dead for the third time.
I know.
We've talked about House of Dark Shadows and the Abominable Dr. Phibes. Go check out those episodes. Now we're talking about a sequel, Night of Dark Shadows, the second of really only two.
Yes.
At least in this time period.
And the last, I'm afraid, yes.
The last. So before we get started, Jonathan, I have something very exciting to announce. Okay. This is the 50th episode of Film at 50.
This is the 50th of 50. Oh,
the only time that will ever happen. It's the 50th of Film at 50. How does that feel?
Well, I feel very honored.
Yeah.
I feel extremely honored, Brian.
Yeah, to be my guest on the 50th episode. You know, when I started this in September of 2020, I was like, be cool to get to 50. Like, could I do 50 episodes of this? Like, we'll see. And I am, been off and running ever since. And
you did it.
Have done incredible episodes in recent weeks, like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Shaft and so many cool things. The Omega Man is dropping this month. And now to get you back on the podcast, Jonathan, to talk about Night of Dark Shadows, really, really fun. I had such a great time chatting with you about the original House of Dark Shadows last year. And so it's really cool to be talking with you again about Night of Dark Shadows.
Well, congratulations. I think that you are doing remarkable things.
Thank you.
And I always love being here talking with you and just making these exciting podcasts with you and to be able to be part of this beautiful process. So thank you very much and congratulations again.
Thank you. Yeah. Celebrating films from 50 years ago. I'm not sure how many people are aware of this particular movie, but for those of you who listened to our episode about House, this was a really, really popular series back in the day, the television series Dark Shadows. And then they brought out two films pretty much back to back. I mean, the House original movie came out in October, I want to say, of 1970. And then by spring of 71, they were in production on Night. And then it came out in August. I mean, this was like, to have a sequel to any movie come out less than a year after the previous one, it's pretty rare. I mean, it happens here and there, but horror films especially, right?
Well, MGM was a bit of a treated their people like workhorses, so yeah, it was pretty standard for MGM at that particular time to just be like, "Yep, you made money. Let's do this again."
Hurry up! Yeah, around this time too, like we just talked about Shaft a few weeks ago, and that movie had two sequels within 2 years, just like boom, boom. So I've talked about this on the podcast before, like sequels are not much of a thing before we get to like the 80s, but occasionally, the James Bond series goes all the way back to 1962. And so there are some franchises, some films that do get very fast sequels, and House of Dark Shadows.
All of the Universal films.
The monster movies from the 30s and 40s. You look at all the sequels they made to Dracula and Frankenstein, all the way into like the mid to late 40s. There's a ton of those. Yep. The Mummy, they touched on like every part of the human body.
The mummy's hand.
The mummy's hand. Okay, there were four, right? Tomb, hand, thumb.
No, thumb was not part of it.
Pinky.
No.
There's four sequels.
I found I stumbled upon a very interesting picture of Chaney, Lon Chaney Jr. in one of the Mummy sequels, where he had all of the bandages on, but without the head.
Okay.
And Jack Pierce is aging his bandages, and so it was a very interesting picture.
Jack Pierce was working on the makeup in like the Mummy sequels.
Jack Pierce worked on the makeup for Universal for decades.
Anything they did.
Even after they were using his stuff even after that he and the studio parted ways.
Okay.
They were still using his stuff. The whole Bud Westmore saga, I don't know if you know anything about that. It's a very complicated thing. Lots of tension. with the Bud Westmore taking over the makeup department at Universal, and lots of tension there. But yeah, there's a lot of Jack Pierce designs and concepts that even were used well past when he departed Universal.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Chaney had a very interesting relationship because, you know, he and Karloff got along really well, and he and Chaney, their relationship was a little different. So
yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, so I guess sequels, you know, as much as I say we don't really get to a whole lot of them until later, they are around. And Night of Dark Shadows, which we're going to talk in the Beyond the Flick segment at the end about our favorite horror movie sequels. When I put this on, the only thing I knew about it from our conversation last time, I remember you telling me that Barnabas does not come back, right? What's the actor's name? Jonathan Frid.
Yeah.
He decided not to come back for this. So if he had said yes to the sequel, they would have made it about him, right?
Yes, it would have been. And they were planning, Dan Curtis was planning to resurrect Barnabas for the sequel. Okay. It would have been an interesting sequel because by that point, Catherine Lee Scott, who was, co-star with Jonathan Frid, played Maggie Evans Josette in House of Dark Shadows. She had moved to Paris. And so she would not have been available for the sequel. So it would have been interesting to see where they took it and what they did with it. And so I think in many ways we're kind of fortunate that sequel didn't come about because we still maintain, you know, the Barnabas Josette love story, you know, as it is. I mean, obviously they would have brought Kate Jackson on board as they did in this film, but I don't know what role she would have played or how they would have developed it. But Jonathan Frid made it very clear that he wasn't doing the sequel, A, because he didn't want to be typecast forever as Barnabas, but that eventually happened. B, because the first one was just too bloody and too gruesome for his taste.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a little bit of the Bela Lugosi factor, right? Like Bela Lugosi, we all think of him as Dracula, but after the 1931 film, the only time he played Dracula on film again, right, was Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Yeah, Abbott and Costello. But he played a lot of Dracula-like vampires.
Yeah, he played similar roles.
The Columbia Pictures, and then in Mark of the Vampire, the other Todd Browning film. So he was always playing a character that looked like Dracula, that sounded like Dracula. It was basically Dracula. They just didn't have permission to use the name, you know.
Just so interesting. Yeah.
And Universal treated Lugosi so badly. You know, he made them so much money, and
they gave him like nothing, right?
And they gave him nothing. And he was just this huge draw, and they would constantly put him in their films and have his name all over the posters and everything like that. And then they just treated him so shabbily. And I think it's really unfortunate because, you know, we never think, even though John Carradine played Dracula like more than anybody else, I think he played him more than Christopher Lee, actually. He played Dracula most frequently in the Universal films after Lugosi. Nobody remembers him as Dracula. We all just remember Lugosi as Count Dracula. And it's just a real shame that they didn't put Lugosi to more use in those Dracula films. I think that if James Whale had directed, and we'll get into this more later on because we're talking about sequels, Dracula's Daughter, as what had originally been planned.
Oh, really?
He would have, yes.
He was in talks to direct the sequel to Dracula?
He was going to direct the sequel. He was going to direct Dracula's Daughter.
Okay.
And it was going to feature a flashback with Lugosi as Dracula in it.
What?
But yes,
that would have been great.
It would have been really awesome. And I think that you would have, had that happened, there would have been a lot more Lugosi Dracula films. But
right. I mean, I guess Lugosi dies at the end of Dracula, so maybe it doesn't make as much sense for him to come back.
I mean, he comes back because, you know, they, in House of Frankenstein or whatever, they pull the stake from the heart of the original Count Dracula.
They can always figure out a way.
Count Dracula. They pull the stake from the heart, and the skeleton reverts to, you know, human form, and Dracula's back. And then, of course, the original Count Dracula, they make a note of this in Abbott and Costello. This is the body of the original Count Dracula. Well, here he is, Bela Lugosi, and he's back again. So, yeah, you can always bring the monsters back, just like you can bring Michael Myers back. You know, it doesn't matter what you do to him.
Yeah, I mean,
Freddy Krueger
is resurrected in Nightmare 4 when a dog pisses on the ground. So there's really, there's no shame. and anything can be done. The audience doesn't care. It's like they care about getting the villain, the creature, whatever it is, back for another movie. They don't care how it's done.
The most horrifying resurrection to Dracula for me was in Dracula Prince of Darkness with Christopher Lee. And I don't know how old I was, maybe like 10 or 11 at the time when I was watching this. And literally they take this guy, string him up by his feet, and then slit his throat. And all his blood drains out and lands on the ashes of Dracula. And then all the smoke and fog comes, and then Dracula comes out of the coffin.
Interesting.
So it really freaked me out. It was very disturbing, very scary, but it's still my favorite way of resurrecting Count Dracula.
So that must have come out. That must have come out after the MPA ratings board was put in place in '68. Is that film you just mentioned? Is that like early '70s? What'd you say? Prince
of Darkness was '66.
66, so before. Wow. Yes. And they like showed the throat being slit and everything.
Well, I mean, a 10-year-old kid. Okay. It's I think it's off camera. I mean, they showed it from the back, so they take the knife and the throat slits, but the blood, like, it just pours out like a waterfall. I mean, it was really horrifying. I wasn't scared of it because I never got scared of these things, but it was horrifying. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like this gross out factor for a 10-year-old me who really just watched the Universals up to that point. And now Hammer's coming along and like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
Christopher Lee played Dracula, 7 or 8 times, something around there?
There he is.
And I feel like, is there another one he's in that came out in 72 where he played Dracula? I feel like there might be one.
Yeah, there's Dracula AD 1972.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
Then there's all sorts of weird.
It might be kind of fun to do an episode on one of the Christopher Lee Dracula films and kind of talk about them, because I think I've only seen 1 or 2 of them. I can maybe just binge, if not all of them, maybe like half of them or something.
Hey, that would be cool. Ones. Yeah, that would be fun.
That'd be fun too. Yeah. All right, so Night of Dark Shadows. For our listeners who might not be aware of this movie, here's just a short synopsis what this movie's about. This semi-sequel to House. So recently married Quentin and Tracy Collins have moved into Collinwood, a New England estate that's long been in the Collins family. Their married novelist friends, Alex and Claire, have been invited to stay with them. Quentin is a painter trying to find inspiration, and the estate's housekeeper, Carlotta, directs him to a room in the tower. Quentin soon thereafter begins to have visions and nightmares, mostly of a young woman hanging dead from a tree outside the estate and a young girl in a room of the mansion holding a doll. Quentin starts to become more and more possessed by spirits in the house, putting his risk. Shit, it's like, fucked up that sentence. Okay, let me say that again. Quentin starts to become more and more possessed by the spirits in the house, risking the life of his new bride, Tracy. Anything you'd like to add to that synopsis?
No, that was a very detailed synopsis. Yeah, it was good.
So that's kind of the main storyline of the movie. And then I have some trivia here. I don't know how much trivia you have on the House of Dark Shadows episode. You shared a lot, Jonathan. So what do you have for us?
I got a lot. So
I mean, I just have a few things, and we've already mentioned that Jonathan Frid did not come back, and it's one thing I wanted to mention from before. It's like, talk about power as an actor. Like, your decision to not do the sequel makes it so they have to rewrite or write something brand new. Yep. It's not like they could like take a script and go, that actor's not coming back, we can recast it, or well, let's just take out the character and we'll do no, they had to just go in a whole new direction, right, for this one.
So that is 100% true, and I think that goes to the sort of power and draw of the character of Barnabas, who was the most famous vampire next to Dracula for decades. Starting in the 60s when he debuted on Dark Shadows, and very much a household name. And I think it would have been cool to see Barnabas brought back and continue after the series ended. This film started production right after the series wrapped.
Okay. The series wrapped in 71, right?
Yes, the series wrapped in April 71.
Okay.
And so this was started right afterwards. David Selby, of course, who plays Quentin in the film and played Quentin on the TV series. he only ever played Quentin on the TV series, which was why it was an odd choice to have him play someone named Charles in the past in the film, but I guess they had their reasons for doing it. Quentin did not appear in the last few episodes of Dark Shadows because he had appendicitis.
Oh, okay.
And so he was not around for the big finale. But the end of Dark Shadows, the last storyline on Dark Shadows is nothing really to shake a stick at or anything. It's sort of, it didn't go out with a bang or anything. It didn't have Barnabas, didn't have any of the characters that everybody sort of knew and loved. It was this parallel time, alternate universe characters, sort of like what would have happened if Barnabas had lived as a human and had a son. And so it focuses on his son, and so it's an okay storyline, but it's not a lot of fans that really just love this particular storyline. But Quentin was in it, as he was in every single story from the end of 1968. Okay. But he didn't appear in the final episodes or anything, and so his character was just sort of written off.
So he was the male lead of this movie, David Selby. He was on the show starting in 68.
Yes, at the end of 1968, and he came on the show. So Dark Shadows was super popular with the arrival of Barnabas, and then when they added Quentin, who you see behind me for your YouTube viewers,
Quentin's behind you.
Yeah, Quentin, my little 12-inch action figure.
Okay.
Quentin, when they added Quentin, he was a ghost. He didn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
He never talked, and the reason he didn't talk was because he had this Southern drawl.
Oh, okay.
And so when he
how long did he not talk?
A couple months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so he never talked as a ghost. And so the haunting of Collinwood, Quentin's haunting of Collinwood, is my personal favorite storyline.
Okay.
In Dark Shadows. And he takes possession of the children. It's very much inspired by Turn of the Screw with the governess. And I think there are those are some of the most iconic episodes. And one of the most frightening episode of Dark Shadows, I think, takes place during this Quentin haunting storyline. And that's where Quentin possesses the children, and the family realizes, wow, these kids are not just playing around, they're actually possessed. That personally for me is the most frightening episode of Dark Shadows, the most disturbing, because Maggie, who's the governess at this time, is walking around the house, and the storm is raging, and she's looking for the children. They're playing hide and seek, can't find them, and it's just very, very disturbing. Lots of ambiance. It's a really well written episode.
So why was David Selby not in House of Dark Shadows? Why is that character not there?
So they needed David Selby. Well, he wasn't part of the original Barnabas storyline, and that focused on the original Barnabas storyline. But furthermore, they needed somebody to star in the TV show, because the TV show. That's right.
They needed actors for the still taping show. Okay.
So he and Laura Parker, who plays Angelique, sort of headed the cast up, while the rest of the main cast went off to film House of Dark Shadows.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so Quentin started off as a ghost, and then Barnabas travels back in time to find out the origins of Quentin Collins, which 1897 is the longest storyline in the series. It goes on for over a year, and it's one of my favorites. It is, I think, the best storyline in the show.
Okay.
Really well written, and the character of Quentin Collins is phenomenal. He's just a phenomenal character, and he's a bad boy, and so everybody loved him. Mm-hmm. And he just sort of brought this sort of attitude to the show that maybe they didn't have before. Jonathan Frid was obviously fielding like way too much crazy fandom from the teenagers at the time, and he said, no, can you bring on another male lead so that I don't have to deal with all of them? And then they brought on Quentin, and then he skyrocketed to teen fandom and everything, and he's appearing on the teen magazines and everything too. So it went sort of crazy. So it was sort of natural to bring on David Selby into the sequel and in a starring role. And I think that if it had not been severely edited, I think it would have been a really good film. But some other facts about it, because I think the most important information that we need to know is that Dan Curtis flew off with the writer Sam Hall and the composer Bob Cobert to MGM to screen his vision for Night of Dark Shadows, and he edited the whole film. It was nicely.
Oh, you're talking about after they had made it and cut it together.
Yeah, after they made it. So so they went to screen it with the head of MGM, and the head of MGM watched it, and he said, "You need to cut almost 50 minutes from this movie.
Insane.
You have 24 hours to do it, or I will do it myself."
Why? Okay, here's my question. Why did he only allow 24 hours? I don't get that. Why couldn't he have a couple weeks? Why was it one day?
Because it was just MGM at the time, and he didn't really care. He looked at the Dark Shadows audience as, a bunch of teenagers. And he told Dan Curtis. Dan Curtis said after he got done with the edit, then they went and they showed him the new edit. And he said, "Okay, well, here it is." The MGM guy says, "Wow, yep, this is a nice, tight thriller. Good job." And Dan Curtis says, "It doesn't make sense." And the MGM guy says, "Well, it doesn't matter with your audience."
Oh, wow.
So he just dismissed the fact that, the vast majority of Dark Shadows fans were young people. And he just said, "Well, we'll put on the names, we'll put on something scary, and it'll be fine." He didn't care about the art of it.
Yeah, he didn't care about the art of it or trying to maybe build on the first one. It was just like, let's get just those words, Dark Shadows, on the marquee. It'll bring the kids and the teens in, and we'll make some money. That's all he cared about.
That's all he cared about, because House of Dark Shadows did so well, made them a lot of money, saved them from bankruptcy. So he said, "Well, let's just get some more money on the table. You got 24 hours to do it." And I think, and that's why you have this film that Dan Curtis was very upset with in the final cut. And Sam Hall actually relates that when he was on the plane back to New York, that he broke down. He just started crying because not only was his script totally decimated in 24 hours, but his wife, Grayson Hall, who's one of the stars, plays Carlotta Drake, the housekeeper. Her work was decimated. And part of the reason that the MGM guy did it was because he didn't like Grayson Hall at all. He did not like her as an actress. And so that was another complication to the Night of Dark Shadows thing.
I cannot even imagine having worked, I mean, even just for a few months or whatever it was, like putting together the script and the cast and shooting a film, and you screen it and it's 125 minutes, whatever it was. And the guy says, "You need to cut 45 minutes out," and you have a day. Like that. I mean, and especially back then when you don't have like Final Cut Pro or Avid or something digital, you can easily kind of go through it and like how are they even able to do that in 24 hours? I don't even know.
Well, they brought in a guy from MGM who'd been doing it his whole life, and he'd have been a real solid guy, very good professional dude. And he's sitting there and he's just, making it happen. Dan Curtis is, frantically running around trying to make the cuts, and he's sitting there and he's like, "Okay, fine, I'll do it." And like, he was totally unfazed by the whole thing, which I think was kind of odd to Dan Curtis and his team, that literally this guy could just be so calm under pressure. Like, "Yeah, I'll just splice here and I'll cut here and it'll be fine." When they were all going kind of crazy. So he was so the guy that they brought in from MGM was very competent in, being able to do what he did. But it was sort of an odd little story.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Now, did you read that they did find the footage in 1999 without sound?
They have, yes. Darren Gross has been trying to get Warner's to get this restoration out there for the public.
Yeah.
And maybe this podcast will bring some more interest to it. I don't know.
Did they ever find the sound though? They can't restore the footage.
They had the record. They had the actors, the living actors, come in and record their audio. And with Grayson Hall,
in like 99.
Yeah. And
they came in and recorded like dialogue for the parts without sound.
A lot of the original actors were able to do that, and so they were able to dub the audio.
So why would they go through all that if they're not planning to release it?
Well, Darren Gross, it's a passion project of his.
Okay.
And he really wants to see this brought to light. But Warner, and so then when the Johnny Depp film came out, the Tim Burton Johnny Depp film came out in 2012, everybody sort of saw that as an opportunity. Or like, well, hey, now Warner Brothers is taking an interest in Dark Shadows. Now we can do it. And then they just pushed out the old cut of Night of Dark Shadows on DVD as a quick money grab. So not much has changed at the studios in all of this time.
It's tough. Yeah. I mean,
But
you have, some examples like the recent Zack Snyder's Justice League, where, I mean, they really took their time to bring that version to fruition. But yeah, 1971 sequel, Night of Dark Shadows. I don't know if there's a lot of clamoring for that today outside of like the real passionate fan base, which is probably small. Like,
and
I don't think they're.
I think it'd be interesting to see it because I look at the current cut of Night of Dark Shadows as a highlight reel. Like that's how I see it. I see it as a highlight reel, like
highlight reel of a longer story.
a longer story, because I'm like, well, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to know more about this. And this is, I'm fortunate to have the script, right? And so I can look and see all of the missing pieces. But it would be really cool to see what those filmed what sections of the film that they were able to restore, and to see if they add more to the overall narrative or not. One of the cool things from the original script was sort of the prologue to the story, and that was never filmed, which I think is unfortunate.
Well, what happened in the prologue?
So in the prologue, there's this hippie, and he's sort of hitchhiking his way north, and he ultimately finds his way to Collinwood, and he sort of becomes lord of the manor because it's kind of abandoned, right? Because after everything that happened with Barnabas and David is gone. I don't know where David went, but David's not there anymore, and so the house is empty, and he sort of just finds his way around, and he's sitting around, and then he starts seeing the ghost of Angelique.
Okay.
And he's being haunted by this ghost of Angelique. Angelique ultimately attacks him, scratches his face, as we see a couple times in the finished cut, and then Carlotta and her nephew Gerard come in, and Gerard kills the hippie.
Oh wow.
And so it sort of is this cool, very moody, atmospheric prologue to this film, saying, well, there's this weird thing going on in this house, and there's these weird people that live in this house, and they're going to kill you. And I think they didn't actually film it. They ended up.
They didn't film it. Okay.
They didn't film that, but I think that if that had been filmed, I think that would have been a really cool sequence of events to see.
Yeah, I mean, the way the movie begins now, it's like it almost opens like Evil Dead, where they're just like in the car on a long drive. They pull up to the house, they get settled. It's kind of that familiar opening 15 minutes.
Fun fact: it was not scripted to rain in the opening sequence, and so David Selby pulled over the car, put up the thing, and they just acted like it was intended to be that way. So it was kind of cool.
Sometimes they do that. Yeah. I would always be afraid of doing that, because what if you're like, oh, we're going to go with it. It's raining. And then halfway through it stops raining. How do you like match the cuts and stuff? I don't know.
Yeah.
But so before we get into like our thoughts on the movie, anything else besides the trivia you've shared? I mean, I always find director's cuts in any movie ever made where the director had a vision and he made it his way, and then the studio took it over and cut it, and we only see the version that was released, and we don't get to see that director's original vision, version. I get upset.
I think
come on,
you have this really well-developed set of characters and this really well-developed story. The character of Gerard is flanked by two dogs at all times in the script, and they shot all of this stuff. And the dogs are sort of this weird sort of snarling thing. They don't like anybody. And he uses them. And one of the relationships that I think is really underdeveloped is the relationship between him and Tracy in the film. Okay. And so he uses the dogs to scare Tracy and sort of assault her in the stables, which then leads up to what happens later in the film. But so I think that was sort of an interesting thing that was cut from the film.
So you have a copy of the script, like you not just something you've read online, like you have a copy.
No, it's a full photocopy.
It's called what? Dark Shadows 2?
Dark Shadows 2.
Because I believe for a time this was called Curse of Dark Shadows.
Yeah, I think.
Do we know why they changed it to Night of Dark Shadows? Any idea?
I don't know that. I mean, I might have known that at some point. I can't recall that right now.
I mean, I think there's Curse of Dark Shadow makes it sound like, I don't know, like there's maybe like animals, like it sounds a little bit werewolfy. I don't know. There's something about Night of Dark Shadows is a little bit more just kind of elegant and simple.
Quentin was the werewolf.
There you go.
On the show. So I mean that does make sense. He wasn't the werewolf in the film, obviously, but there was no werewolf in the film. Yeah, I think that was that's sort of cool. There's some interesting like just production notes that I have. The one scene with where Alex John Carlin goes into the greenhouse. It's kind of a funny thing that happened. So the assistant director is the person that's directing the scene. Because they have to make the panels of glass fall from the greenhouse, at the exact right time.
I like that scene. Where he sees that woman in the distance and he goes in and then the glass falls. Yeah, that was cool.
And so I think that's Angelique trying to kill off as many people as she can so she can have Quentin all to herself. But anyway, I think that's kind of what we lose in the film. Like literally there's this murderous group of people at the estate and they're trying to off everyone except Quentin, right? Yeah, so Alex goes in there, and the assistant director is directing this, and it takes forever to get the glass hoisted up there and get it all exactly where they want, and then of course the glass has to fall. Well, there's every single stuntman they had on this show went to the hospital, and most of the actors did their own stunts in this movie. Even Kate Jackson. I mean, they just had Kate Jackson jumping off horses and all kinds of things.
It's her first movie, right? They're like, go for it.
And they had a lot of fun with it. But this was a very frightening thing that happened on the set where the glass was supposed to fall when the assistant director said 1, 2, 3 now. Well, everybody wanted to hide and kind of get out of the way, from this glass falling. They didn't want to be around for it to happen. And so the assistant director was reminding them, and remember, just when I say now, well, everyone had gone and taken cover. So all they heard was now. So then they dropped the glass. And so the glass comes flying down. Fortunately, he didn't get hurt. Everybody else was ducking for cover.
Oh, my God.
But yeah, he didn't get hurt. But I mean, that's just a chaotic thing. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine that all of a sudden you just are reminding people what's going on and then all of the huge glass comes falling from the ceiling on you? Like, that's like crazy. And there was a lot of interesting things that happened on this set, similar to that. It's sort of the production and the making thing, and special effects. They had a better budget than they did with House of Dark Shadows.
Yeah, I saw here it said 900,000. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's about a $900,000 budget.
It's pretty low,
and so it's still a very low budget, and so they had to do really fun things. And where Nancy Barrett's character Claire shoots at Gerard through the window. Mm-hmm. The way that they had to make that was she fired a blank from the gun. Somebody had a BB pellet in a slingshot. They put the BB pellet through the pane of glass, and then James Storm, who plays Gerard, had a bloody rag in his hand, and he just put it up there. So they had to make all the timing, exactly 100% correct in order to pull off that particular scene. And I think that's sort of the cool thing about having, budgets, low budgets for films is you have to get really creative. Mm-hmm. And you can't just rely, on special effects and things like that. You have to do it all on your own. And so I love hearing that stuff in movies because, amateur filmmakers and people that just, enjoy making films can learn a lot from how to do that without having to have all of the CGI special effects. So a BB, a slingshot, and a bloody rag pulled off, how to shoot somebody through a window. So those are some interesting facts that I have, and I'm sure there'll be more.
Yeah, so I read that this was David Selby's feature film debut. Like, he had been on Dark Shadows for a while. This is his first movie he's in. Same with Kate Jackson. This is her first role in a movie. She would go on to be, very famously, a Charlie's Angel in the later part of the decade. And she had been on the show before, but explain this to me. So on the Dark Shadows TV series, she's playing a different character. So the character of Tracy, we have not met on the series at all. Like, that's like the first time we see Tracy in this universe is in Night of Dark Shadows movie.
Yes.
Okay.
So Kate Jackson was brought on to play Daphne Harridge.
Daphne.
A ghost that was haunting. Everybody starts off as a ghost.
Everybody starts the show as a ghost.
Yeah. So both David Selby and Kate Jackson did. So and then of course they don't play ghosts in the movie. And then Angelique, Laura Parker, who plays Angelique, never played a ghost on the show.
Okay.
I mean, I guess she did in some sort of strange way because she was a witch on the show, and so she would come back from the dead every now and then. But never an official ghost like Kate Jackson and David Selby did. But yeah, so Daphne Harridge is brought on as a ghost. She's a governess, and she's sort of protecting the children who are sort of at the mercy of James Storm, who plays Gerard, and as a ghost. And they're sort of at this particular point, this is 1970, and so they're trying to rehash a bit of the 1968 Quentin plot, sort of to drive the ratings kind of back up again. And they were also just kind of running out of Gothic novels and monster movies to steal from at this particular point. So I said, well, let's just try it again. But I think that Kate Jackson was one of the best things to happen to Dark Shadows in its final year, because Catherine Lee Scott was on her way out. Maggie, as I mentioned, she was going off to Paris. And so they needed to have an ingenue. And I think that Kate Jackson was a fantastic ingenue on the show. And I love the fact that she's still maintaining that traditional ingenue role in this movie, but then she kind of, gets some chutzpah going on with this big bat that she takes to Gerard, in that film. I think that was really kind of cool. And I think that kind of shows where, everything was going, society was going as a transition period between the 1960s and the 1970s in terms of how women are portrayed. I think also, I think that was an interesting commentary, because generally the young woman on Dark Shadows, as in most Gothic stories, Gothic novels, is the ingenue. And just having her, just sort of save her husband like that at the end, really cool fact, without giving anything away. She was, after she hit Gerard, he was, because this doesn't happen in the movie, so I'm not giving anything away.
Okay.
He was supposed to fall backwards into some sort of high voltage fencing and be fried to death. That's what appears in the original script. So that's kind of cool. That would have been a really cool thing to kind of see. It didn't happen in the film, so I'm not giving anything away. There's no spoilers there.
Would have been too expensive.
Would have been too expensive. Yeah, couldn't have pulled it off. But yeah.
So yeah. was the audience for the show confused at the beginning of this movie, because is Quentin married in the show to someone else? Like, he's just all of a sudden he's married to this character we've never met on the show?
I think that the Dark Shadows audience is used to seeing their beloved acters playing all sorts of people and all sorts of variations of their
so they
characters.
were just prepared for that.
There's the original Quentin Collins from 1897. There's his ancestor in 1840.
Okay.
Then there's Quentin Collins, because Quentin Collins on the show became immortal. He was the Dorian. He started off as a ghost, became a werewolf, and then became Dorian Gray. And so he became immortal through his portrait. How do you follow this? It's what happens every day. So, it comes sort of naturally. And so he was immortal. And so then the Quentin Collins from 1897 is still alive in present day 1970 Collinwood as well. So there's a whole bunch of Quentin. And then there's the parallel time Quentin. And in parallel time, Quentin was married to Maggie. And so that is sort of where you have this sort of story sort of stemming off of, is that parallel time segment that they did when House of Dark Shadows was filming, and they had to get rid of all of the regular cast. Quentin marries Maggie in parallel time. She becomes a Rebecca type character and gets scared off by Grayson Hall, who plays a very Mrs. Danvers like character. And so then she goes and films House of Dark Shadows after she's been scared off by the crazy housekeeper. And so, yeah. So, I mean, it all makes sense, Brian. You just have to sit down and you have to watch it, and it'll all make perfectly good sense to you. But yeah, I know it does sound a little complicated when I try to explain it. But yes, Kate Jackson was on the show. She was brought in as the ingenue to sort of replace Catherine Lee Scott after she left. And she reminds me a lot of Alexandra Moltke, who played Victoria Winters in the first couple of years of the show. And I think that if they ever wanted to resurrect the character of Victoria Winters, because they tried to do it 2 times in the show, they should have just found Kate Jackson. Like, they tried to bring back Victoria Winters in 1968 after Alexandra Moltke got pregnant and left the show. And the replacement didn't go over all that well with the audience, because because it's very hard to replace somebody that you see every single day, right? In this particular role. Soaps do it all the time now, but in the 1960s it was a little different, especially with such a young audience. They're not going to adapt well to that. But I think if they brought Kate Jackson on, I think that they probably would have been able to keep the character of Victoria Winters, but she didn't come till 2 years later. So, and then she went on Dark Shadows, Night of Dark Shadows, another TV series, and then became super famous with Charlie's Angels. So it all worked out well.
It's all a bit complicated for me, Jonathan. I like horror franchises like Scream, where it's just like a continuation and it's the same actors playing the same characters. I mean, in Night of Dark Shadows, we get my favorite actress from House of Dark Shadows, Grayson Hall, but she's not playing the same character. So I'm like, what is happening right now?
Well, I mean, it's sort of like an American Horror Story type thing. And
it's an American Horror Story done just twice for Dark Shadows, the film.
Well, I know, but in the TV series, it happened all the time because Grayson Hall played like 8 characters or something in the TV show.
And you could follow it. Like, would you have to watch every episode? Like, if you missed a few, you just be like, okay, they're all different people.
Yeah, no, because you understand that now. Well, now people aren't wearing regular clothes; they're wearing 18th century gowns and stuff. So they're in a different time period.
True. Yeah. So I was happy that she was back because I really love her and her presence, and that makes me mad that this MGM guy didn't like her and was like, could you cut 40 plus minutes from the movie and try to have most of it be Grayson Hall? Like, are you serious?
Yeah, it was not good because I think this was a really phenomenal performance from Grayson Hall. The little of it that we get to see, I think she did just remarkable as this Mrs. Danvers.
How long was House? Was it like an hour and 45?
I think House of Dark Shadows was the same time.
Is House of Dark Shadows like 95 minutes? It's like the same as this?
I think it was about
I don't remember
it
being that long.
No, it goes by super fast. The House of Dark Shadows goes by like really quick.
I mean, I'm not completely against the MGM guy's insistence that maybe we cut this down. I mean, 129 minutes for this, that does seem a little long. But I would have rather he given Dan Curtis like 2 weeks to cut it and let's remove maybe 10, 15 minutes, not 45. That's crazy.
I think that would have been fair. And I think that's kind of what they were expecting because they did have to drop a lot of stuff from House of Dark Shadows too. The fortunate thing is that in House of Dark Shadows, because there were so many more characters, there was a lot more that they could cut without it affecting the narrative at all. And then in this one, because it's so specifically focused on, this very small group of characters.
Just a few characters in this one.
That cutting, anything above 10 or 15 minutes really damages the integrity of the plot. And that's just something to see. If you're not a director, if you're not a writer, if you're just some, big wig guy, they don't understand that. And I've worked with people like that too. They don't understand the art of anything.
He wanted a product.
And so it's sort of weird to just have to try to explain that to fans that this is how these people operate, because I don't understand how they operate. I mean, I've worked with them, so I know how they are. But I mean, I just like, okay, yeah, I understand that's what you're going for, but it's really hard to just like change everything overnight and to Dan Curtis and to be asked to do this. And this was his farewell to Dark Shadows, really. I mean, there was supposed to be a third
did he ever do, after Night of Dark Shadows, does Dan Curtis do anything else with Dark Shadow?
Yeah, the 1991 series.
The 1991 he was a part of. He was a creative force.
He was the director, the producer.
Okay. Cool.
Dark
so
Shadows
this is
and then Dark Shadows was his baby. Like, he wanted to distance himself from it for a while, but he kept going back to it. And I think that if you look at Burnt Offerings, you'll notice a lot of similarities between Burnt Offerings and Night of Dark Shadows, because I think he kind of wanted to sort of, this was like a wound that he needed to heal, and I think that Burnt Offerings was a way for him to go about it. It's also through MGM to go about it and have a more consistent.
I love that title, Burnt Offering.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting title, isn't it?
No, I'm excited. I'm excited for that. That's coming up in a few years, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So what's left on the screen of these 94-ish minutes, whatever it is? What do we think of Night of Dark Shadows just as a movie? If you were to just negate, forget all of that other stuff, if you just watch this as a movie, which I did yesterday, what did you think?
It came on television last year. I watched it on TV last year. It was just, one of those things that came on TV, and I'm like, I'm going to watch it. And it'd been a while since I'd seen the movie, and a while since I'd revisited the script or anything like that. And I just watched it, and I'm like, for as badly as this was cut, I can still follow a story here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, but I'm always watching it from the standpoint of what more is there to the story.
Yeah,
like that's the whole point that I'm watching it from. Like, okay, so there's this scene, this kind of makes sense. I can connect it in my mind because I understand how Dark Shadows works. I understand how these writers work. I understand this stuff. But so I would like to hear your perspective of having watched this film as it butchered in such a terribly short amount of time. Like, do you understand it? Like, that's what I want to know.
So no, that was my big criticism. I wrote down a couple times. I think I wrote twice in my 2 pages of notes. I don't understand what's happening right now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this might be controversial, Jonathan. As a movie, I actually like this a little bit more than House of Dark Shadow.
I think it's a really good
I think it's a little bit scarier. It moves a little bit faster. It's got a smaller group of characters. And some scenes that I thought were really gripping. I thought the last 20 minutes, I really liked a lot of the handheld, and so much of House feels very old fashioned, whereas a lot of stuff in Night feels a little bit more progressive, like feels a little bit more Wes Craven, indie horror of the early 70s. Some cool stuff with the camera. And I really liked the actors in this. And even though as a whole, the story was a little bit hard to follow at times, there were just so many characters in House that I felt like, I have to kind of be familiar with the show to really get this. Mm-hmm. Whereas Night felt kind of this other thing, and I could just kind of get involved with it on that level.
Yeah, I think that if we had seen the Dan Curtis's vision for this film, you would have had one of the best Dark Shadows projects. I don't know if it's the absolute best, but I think you would have had one of the best Dark Shadows projects that's ever been made, because I think it's a really, I don't love everything about the way that Sam Hall wrote it. I think the story is phenomenal. And I think that, if you had been given a little more screen time and, those cuts had not been made, I think that it would have been a very enjoyable movie to watch. Like, I still enjoy it, but I never can enjoy it as much as I think I could have if I had known that there's not huge chunks missing. But I think the main problem with the plot, and you can tell how quickly they had to butcher it, because literally the music cues get cut. Literally, yeah. Especially towards the end of the film, they must have just been really tired, and they couldn't do anything to
they were in hour 23, and they had just a few minutes, and they were like, we just gotta cut because the music changes from note to a totally different note. And I did like some of the music, though. Some of the music in this was cool. Music was really awesome, I think, in Night of Dark Shadows. He had a lot more liberty and freedom, because in House of Dark Shadows, Dan Curtis said, you make the music just like the TV show. But in Night of Dark Shadows, he was like, okay, you do what you want. I still want some familiar music in there, obviously, but Quentin's theme was in there. Joanna's theme, which became the love theme, was in there. But if you listen to the full score, which is probably still out there, you can still buy it. It sounds so different. Okay. Is it the whole thing? It's like the 129-minute score?
Well, it's
however long it is.
It's not that long, because there's some cues that are played throughout the thing as usual. But I think the most important thing about the music is that you have Quentin's theme that's being played in this. And there was a scene that happens very early on in the film where Angelique is playing the piano in a flashback, right? So Quentin is having this flashback to Angelique and Charles, and she's playing the piano, and she says, whenever I play, even when I'm not around you, I play the song and I feel like I'm close to you. And so I think that, and that was sort of a big thing that Bob Cobert tried to do in terms of storytelling, is he wanted to make sure that the audience was very familiar with, every time they heard this music, the ghost of Charles Collins was possessing Quentin.
Oh, okay.
And so that was a really cool storytelling device using the music. And so I think you have this really awesome collaboration between Bob Cobert, whom I love. All of his music is phenomenal. And then Dan Curtis. And in this film, as it was originally created, it was this very beautiful love letter to Dark Shadows through both music and story. And I think they intertwined perfectly. And I'm very upset. I think I'm most upset about not being able to see that more than anything else play out.
What if you were to eventually see the 129-minute cut and it wasn't good?
Well, I mean, considering the fact that I enjoy the cut as it is,
yeah,
I think that would
it would just be richer.
Yeah, I think it just sort of adds to it. Obviously, I really wanted to see the hippie scene that was never filmed, but having those flashbacks, having a whole bunch of stuff, like I have a list of scenes that were cut.
Yeah, so I wrote, so it says a flashback between the doomed lovers Charles and Angelique was cut. 2 scenes featuring menacing groundskeeper Gerard Stiles.
Yeah.
Romantic interludes between Quentin and Tracy. A candlelit exorcism sequence in the gallery, which was the film's original climax. And the hanging sequence, as well as several other scenes, with intensity on par with an R-rated film.
Yes.
So I read twice on 2 different sites that the 129-minute cut probably would have been rated R, not PG.
Yeah. I mean, it was the hanging scene, especially. Dan Curtis made that really intense.
Yeah.
And I think part of what we miss in this is Angelique cursed everyone before she was hanged. And so that was a big part that was missing too. But yeah, I have a complete list of scenes that were cut. And sometimes it's massive. Like this is literally 10 scenes that were cut from the film, like consecutively. 10 consecutive scenes.
There was a section of the movie of 10 scenes that were all just removed, like boom.
Yep, scenes 41 through 50 were just cut. Scenes 63 through 73 were cut. That's a lot of those really important narrative scenes. But what I'm also really upset about is the end of the movie, that the exorcism. So there's this whole part where they go back in the house, right? And this is really where the movie is starting to pick up.
Oh, the exorcism happened then, like after they go back and the movie's wrapping up. Okay.
Yes. So they go back in the house and they're searching the house. And now when they had to rewrite the story, they said, we're just going in to find Carlotta. But the whole point of them going back into the house was to try and find where Charles Collins had been buried. So they could find his body and remove his body and bury it, give it a proper burial. Because the story, which is, I think, terribly, it's just butchered in so many ways. But the story that I think was really good in here was that in the flashbacks, Charles Collins was walled up in a room in the basement of the house. And he was put in there with Angelique's body. Oh. And so he had to die in this room with the dead body of Angelique in there, which is why Laura Collins in the flashback at the cemetery is laughing, because Reverend Strack is burying an empty coffin, because the body of Angelique is actually buried under the basement of the house. And this whole storyline, this is such an essential thing to the haunting of Collinwood, is just cut. And so they figure if they can go in, if they can find Charles's body, they go in, they find Charles's body, but they also find Angelique's body. So they take the bodies, they bury them at the cemetery. They say, okay, this is going to put an end to all of this. And then they have the exorcism, like of the house, and like maybe this will finally make it go away. And what we see is they go in the house. Tracy somehow gets locked in a room. Carlotta does what Carlotta does without giving any spoilers, and then it's just sort of over, right? And
very
so you
quick,
don't,
yeah.
It's super quick, but you really had this entire narrative that takes place at the end of the film that is, I think, the most important part of the movie, and it's just cut.
Now, the MGM guy, he didn't force Dan Curtis to necessarily cut certain parts of the movie, right? No. So why do you think Curtis couldn't have cut some more off the top when they're just getting there.
Well,
I think
it's because of the time. Because I think, you start off, you're like, well, this is important. This is important. This is important. You got the MGM guy sitting there. Well, we're at like 80 minutes now. So let's just chop off the 20 minutes from the end of the film. Because I think that's what they had to do. I really think that's what they had to do. Because, as you go in as an editor,
if you have a day, you can't you can't like, well, let's try it this way. And then say, like, they were like, okay, what are sections that we can cut where the movie still makes somewhat sense? I guess one place to cut would be the last end sequence. But if he really believed in it, I think he would have figured out a way to keep it.
Well, I think he just ran out of time. I really do think he just ran out of time because
24 hours.
Yeah, if you
Who
watch
is this monster?
I can give you his name, but I don't want a defamation lawsuit. But no, his So if you look at the way that things were cut from the film and you compare the script, you see that so many edits happen after those establishing scenes. Like, I think those establishing scenes could have been cut a lot more.
Yeah.
But I think that they went into this not really knowing exactly how much had to be cut. He heard, oh, you have to cut, 45 minutes from the film, but he didn't really process what that would mean. Just like if you make a film, you're like, okay, well, we can probably cut here and there, and then we'll save some time. But I think he didn't really process what that would mean for the finale. And so by the time they got to the finale, they're just like, just take it all out and just have the actors dub some lines and we'll try and have it make sense. And then I think Curtis was hoping that when he showed it to the MGM guy, that the MGM guy would say, wow, this doesn't make sense, because Dan Curtis is like, this doesn't make sense, but here you go. And the MGM guy's like, this is great. And so I think he was kind of hoping for the when they screened.
Oh, maybe he thought, the guy's clearly going to see this doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
That's
He's
right.
going to for even a few more days. And it backfired.
I firmly believe that's what he was thinking. I firmly believe that's what he was thinking. He was thinking, we'll just do this. He's kind of a bullheaded guy.
Like, if it were me, like, I would have found 20 minutes to cut. And like, I would have really tried to keep anything that I love that I felt like needed to be there. Like, okay, he wanted me to cut 45 minutes. I'm going to cut 25 minutes and then bring it back. I mean, I guess my fear would be, he'd see that and say, you didn't cut it down to 90 minutes like I wanted. You're done. Give me the movie and I'm going to cut the rest of it. So I guess there's that fear. Like, well, at least I can cut it down to 95 minutes. So, I mean, I get that. But I mean, I would love to know what, like, his thoughts about this and especially that ending. It sounds so interesting. I'd love to see it.
It's a very well scripted ending. Like, my problem with the script, it's really my only problem with the script as it's written, and it's still in the film, is where, because you would think that this maybe was something that was dubbed in sort of to make things make sense, but it was actually written in the script this way, which is kind of disappointing, is when Carlotta does her explanation of why things are the way that they are, right? And so that actually is scripted in the script, which I think is not the best way of doing it. I think the two in the film we have now, I feel like Tracy and Quentin are pretty well developed. I kind of get them. Yeah. A lot of the supporting characters are the ones where I would get confused, like the married couple, the friends. Yeah. They're just like in the movie sporadically, and it took me a while to even figure out who they were. It was just like, oh, okay, who's this guy? And then Carlotta just shows up here and there, and you can tell that some of her stuff's been cut. The Jenkins have a really interesting story arc, and they help solve the mystery in the original script, because Alex is John Carlin. Alex is the guy that is writing a ghost story.
Yeah, they both write novels, right?
Yeah, they're a novelist team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to write this ghost story about somebody at Collinwood, and he starts investigating the past. Yeah. And that's when he digs up, there's this Charles Collins dude. There's this Angelique Collins lady. And so he starts uncovering the mystery. And so all of this was cut. Too. And so that's a lot of the whole mystery element is cut. Like, literally, David Selby has this limp in the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're like, okay, he has a limp, he's acting weird, but there's a reason that he has the limp, right? And so that's all been cut. And so you would, as a viewer, because this is one thing that I when I was watching it last night, I sat down and I said, they don't explain why he has the limp, and if he has the limp that he must be possessed by Charles Collins. That's never established here, but in the script, the character of Alex digs that up. And so I think that Alex and Claire were really important characters to this that just sort of got lost. I think they could have done more cutting of Gerard, because although he's an interesting character, I don't think he's as essential to the plot as the Jenkinses are. And so, I think they cut the best things about Gerard, like his dogs, like all of his other stuff, was sort of interesting.
Like, how much is Claire in this movie? Like, I feel like Claire's not in this much.
She's in the movie quite, in terms of the script. She's in there.
She's in the script a lot.
She's in the script quite a lot. Yeah. I mean, she and her husband play a really crucial role in unraveling the mystery.
So crucial that we get their wrap-up story at the end of this movie in the end credits,
which was not in the script.
Where did that come from? That was very strange. Like, it has a great final shot and cut to black, and I went, oh, cool. And then it has like this postscript of what happened to Claire and her husband, and I'm like, what?
I don't know why that decision was made.
Very strange.
It's not in Sam Hall's script.
That was like the last 10 minutes of the editing of that 24-hour day.
Probably.
They were like, well, we
gotta have something make sense. So here, let's just have this.
Well, at least they didn't like every 30 minutes like have like a 30-second crawl of like, here's what you've missed. You know, it could have been bad.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I think that I think we also miss out on the character of Angelique a lot, because Laura Parker playing Angelique, you know, she's one of the stars of the TV shows, like one of the huge draws.
Okay, and the same actress from the show is Angelique in the movie?
Yep. Okay. And so she actually is in the original Dark Shadows story, which this is not related to, Night of Dark Shadows. She is the person that Barnabas has an affair with. And before he meets Josette. And so as a result of him having the affair with Angelique, and then her being shunned because she's a lowly servant, and she's not a grand lady, she curses Barnabas to be a vampire after he attempts to murder her. So Angelique is responsible for Barnabas being Barnabas, but that was not addressed in House of Dark Shadows, and it was not addressed in Night of Dark Shadows, because it's sort of a different continuity, those two particular films. The one interesting thing is that when in House of Dark Shadows, when Barnabas is describing, when he's in Josette's room, when he's talking to Willie and he's describing how he became cursed as a vampire, he says, when they placed this curse upon me. So it's sort of interesting. It's this this mysterious group of people who placed this curse on him, because they didn't want to explain why Barnabas was a vampire in, House of Dark Shadows, because that would take way too much time. But he never mentioned, Angelique. He never mentioned anybody. So in the continuity, in the timeline of the Dark Shadows films, Angelique was never the person to place a curse on Barnabas.
Is there anyone in the House of Dark Shadows movie, any character from that film that's in Night of Dark Shadow?
Just Elizabeth Collins' daughter, Joan Bennett's character. She's not in the movie, but she's mentioned. She's the only one. She's the only one that's. She's the only one that.
I was watching Night, and I'm like, connection. Is there any character from the last movie? I couldn't.
No, there's no character from the last movie, but she's the only character that is mentioned in the script. Okay. Mrs. Stoddard served tea at this particular time, and this used to be Mrs. Stoddard's room when she was a little girl. So Joan Bennett's character is the only character that is mentioned, and she dies somewhere between House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows, but we don't know when, we don't know how, we just know that she's not in control of the house anymore. So this film has to take place.
Does the story of Night of Dark Shadows takes place in the same reality of House, right? It's not like two parallel universes.
It would have to, and the two can coexist.
Okay.
The two absolutely can coexist within the same universe. There's nothing that would prevent that from happening. But the only connection between House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows is the character of Elizabeth Collins Stoddard.
Well, the house, isn't it the same house?
It's the same house, yeah.
The same house, okay.
It's the same house, but that's literally the only connection between the two scripts. But we don't know. There's some indeterminate amount of time that passes from the end of House of Dark Shadows where Liz Stoddard has to die, and then the house just goes to nobody, and then we don't know what happens to David. Who knows what happened to David? Apparently, he didn't.
Did the Grayson Hall character in House survive that movie? Can't remember.
I think you're supposed to interpret it as if she died, but I think that if they had filmed a sequel, she would not have died. I think that they should have had a scene at night. Yeah.
They should have had a scene at night where her character from House comes in, and they could have had the same actress play both parts.
Well, I mean, they did that in the TV show. They actually interacted.
Could have been the Parent Trap for a scene.
they interacted with their alternate universe selves.
Oh, I bet they did. How many episodes was the show?
1,225.
You should do a podcast on that series, Jonathan.
On
just
every single episode, Brian.
I've seen people do it for like some of my favorites, like Buffy and some of these things, and it's hard when a show's 140 episodes, 144, I believe Buffy was. There's always kind of like an end in sight when you're doing a podcast on a show that's only so many episodes. But if you have how many? 1,600?
No, 1,200.
1,200 episodes. That podcast could go a long time.
It could, but there's a lot of people that they've written blogs about the episodes, and there are tons of people that do it.
I could be your guest for the 50th episode of that one.
That's right, you could be. Our 50th episode on Dark Shadows Daily.
I get to see you. You're like, all right, episode 1,196. Welcome back, everybody. There's another one.
Yeah, it would be fun. I mean, I have enough to say about it for sure.
You would have. I bet you would have. Every episode would be at least 90 minutes. You would have so much trivia about every episode.
Probably. Yeah.
All right, so let's see what else about the movie. So yeah, I mean, I was looking for some moments that were scarier. I felt like the visions he has are a little bit flat, like they're not super scary. I mean, once you know it's a vision or a nightmare, it kind of takes away the tension a little bit because you're like, well, he'll be okay.
But that's the cool thing about the original script. Okay. And I think the original cut of the film is you found out that they weren't visions.
Oh.
And I think that was one of it's in the movie where literally his visions intermix with reality, right? So when he goes in to attempt to kill Tracy, he's actually seeing his wife from...
Is that Angelique he's seeing, or that's someone else?
He's seeing his wife from the 1800s because he was having an affair with his brother's wife, Angelique, in this film. But I do not blame you for not getting that because of the cuts that were made.
Okay. I think the two actresses look pretty similar. They're both like pretty blondes, right?
They originally were going to have another actress, Virginia Vestoff, play Quentin's wife in the film, but she was doing another project, so they brought in this other actress who played a phoenix in Dark Shadows, which is probably my favorite my favorite pre-Barnabas storyline before Barnabas arrives. It's the Phoenix played by Diana Malay.
Okay.
And she burns herself up and comes back every 100 years.
Why?
It's how she gets eternal life.
But she has to be gone for 100 years.
Yeah, but then she gets to come back.
For how long?
Well, as long as need be to do what she needs to do. Her ultimate goal is to burn her children alive with her, so they become phoenixes too.
This show sounds bonkers.
It is, but it makes total sense if you watch it.
If it was 3 12-episode seasons, I'd do it. But it's just so long. It'd be like you saying, all right, let's watch all of Days of Our Lives, starting from episode 1.
Well, it's a little more exciting than that. But that's the thing about Dark Shadows is it actually is it once it gets going, it keeps going. Like there's never like once it takes off, there's never this lull.
There's not in 1200 episodes. There's not like filler weeks of like 20 episodes of nothing really happening. Everyone just talking about how they're doing.
There's always some crazy thing going on, which is why when I explain this stuff to you, you're like, well, this is insane, because you go from having everybody's a ghost, and now you got this phoenix, and you got a vampire, and the witch is cursing the vampire, and you got all of this stuff going on, right? But because there's never a lull in the show, and it just keeps going, and in fact it picks up steam just the more it goes on, like you just follow along.
Is the show streaming anywhere? Do you know?
Oh yeah,
is it on Amazon Prime?
It's on. I don't know if it's still on Amazon Prime, but it was on Amazon Prime. And
every
it's
episode,
for free, every episode, and then it's on Tubi. I think it's on Tubi, and then there's some other.
Did they release the whole thing on DVD?
Yeah, there was actually. I bought all the collections separately, so it literally takes up an entire wall of the house. But they have this nice compact coffin box set
of the whole thing.
Of the whole series, yeah.
How much is that? Like $50-$60 or more?
Oh no, it's $500, I think.
Oh, fine. Well, I got a box set of a show. Well, TV shows now, there's so many of them are on streaming that usually, if you want to buy like a DVD box set now of the complete series of a show, like I feel like I've gotten a couple in the last 5 years, and they're like $50. But you're right, it's the Dark Shadows is so long, so many DVDs, I guess it would make more sense that'd be more in the hundreds.
Every collection when it initially came out was $60. And there were 26 original collections, 6 prequel collections. So you're looking at 32. So 32 times 60. I'm not a mathematician. You do it. You figure out how much money I spent, Brian. And now these people can just go in for $500.
This is why you need to do a podcast. You can really make your money back, because boy, there's so much money in podcasting, John.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Raking it in. $100 bills stacked to the ceiling. All right, so Night of Dark Shadows, back to our film today. Something that I noted twice in my notes was I felt like Dan Curtis did a better directing job in this than he did in House. Like I felt like there was more energy. He had some cool like handheld throughout the movie, give some like tension to scenes. The way he would zoom in on characters' faces was kind of cool. And then I remember vaguely, wasn't there like a car crash in House of Dark Shadows that was done really amateur, like did not look great? And then in this movie, we get a car chase that goes on for a minute and a half, and it's cut really well. It's shot really well. There's there's a lot of excitement, and
the car crash in House of Dark Shadows is done mostly off camera.
Right.
So I think that's what you're referring to. But in this one, obviously the cars crash right in front of the camera.
And it's like a chase, and like he's like there's a lot of angles, and there's like it's well done. I'm like, okay, good on you, Dan.
He's House of Dark Shadows was his first time directing really
a movie.
Anything. Well,
he had never directed the show. Okay.
He directed a couple episodes of the show.
Yeah.
There is this director, and we don't know who it is, that directed a few episodes of Dark Shadows. The credited episodes are under the name Penberry Jones, but we don't know who Penberry Jones is. Nobody really has any recollection of who Penberry Jones is. And so a lot of people have surmised that this was Dan Curtis sort of wanting to go under an assumed identity to direct a few episodes. Yeah. And so he directed a few episodes credited on Dark Shadows, and they were very interesting episodes. Dan Curtis has some trademarks. Like the more you watch Dan Curtis, the more you see stuff. Like he directed a whole bunch of television films. Like he directed like Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He did this stuff, but he never directed, a major motion picture. And so having that larger budget, very small budget, but having that larger budget, I think he sort of viewed House of Dark Shadows as, we got to make this happen, right? But Night of Dark Shadows, he started to go in, and everyone that worked with him on the film was like, he knew exactly what he wanted. Like he came in every day with a very precise vision, with very exacting notes, with very specific directions. And he had his vision in mind every single day, which I think is why it was so bad when MGM butchered it like they did. Because he literally is like, well, House of Dark Shadows, we just sort of were, trying to to make it where we could. But this was my baby, in film. And so he did a great job of directing it. And I think it's unfortunate that we don't get to see, his particular vision, because, the highlight reel that we see, I think
highlight reel, not
like
terrible.
you mentioned, has some really good stuff in it.
It seems like, so he made his first movies, probably learning his craft a little bit in that, like on the go, on the day. And then I think by the second film, I feel like he's more confident and he's like, oh, let me take more chances here and do some cool stuff. And I liked some of what he was doing here. It felt a little bit more contemporary for its time than the first movie did.
Well, he also had more time not only did the studio give him more time, but he also had more time because he didn't have to rush the actors back to ABC.
Oh, right. Because they were filming the show at the same time they were filming the first movie. This time the show was done, you said. And they were taking focus on the movie.
And when Barnabas was locked in the coffin for all that time, they lost ratings. They lost viewers. When he was out filming House of Dark Shadows. And I think that was part of the reason that ultimately led to the cancellation, was because Barnabas was gone for so long.
Do you think if Barnabas, the character, had been in Night of Dark Shadows, that the movie had done better at the box office? They might have made like a third one? Or
well, the movie didn't do badly at the box office.
It did. I couldn't find the box office numbers.
It just made a couple 100,000 less than House of Dark Shadows.
Okay, so not terrible.
But the reason, and House of Dark Shadows was considered a major success for MGM the year before, right? Mm-hmm. But the reason that I think that people don't think that it made all that much money, even though it made a decent amount, it made 600,000 over its budget just in the United States or something, right? Mm-hmm. The reason I think is that it doesn't have this critical acclaim or whatever is simply because of the bad taste that was left in everyone's mouth after that editing, the butchering process, And so I think that's one of the reasons that we don't really, think of the film as being a success. Mm-hmm. Even though it was monetarily, it did very well for itself. I think that by that particular point, everyone was just kind of done. I think that had Barnabas been in the film, I think the name Dark Shadows itself, because back then you watch a movie trailer, you don't really know anything about it and you don't pay that much attention. So you probably go in thinking that Barnabas is going to be in the film. Mm. Like, I think a lot of the audience went in thinking Barnabas was going to be in the film anyway, right? Because that's what I would think.
Yeah, like that Halloween 3 Season of the Witch syndrome, where back in the early 80s, I don't know if that many people were paying close attention, and they went to see Halloween 3 thinking it was about Michael Myers, and it wasn't, and that really created a problem. Like,
it created a big problem.
People did not like it or recommend it to anybody, so it died a very quick death, and then we didn't get another Halloween film for 6 years. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. So I think that you're experiencing something similar with Night of Dark Shadows, because it's a very different type of Dark Shadows. I think it's dark. I think it's very close to the original flavor of Dark Shadows. I think it's very close to Dark Shadows in its truest form.
Okay.
But in terms of storytelling, because Dark Shadows is not a monster movie, it's not a soap opera. It's a gothic novel.
Yeah,
is what it is, and that's what this film was. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it was very successful in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think they plan to have a third film, but I think at that particular point, Dan Curtis was just like, no, I'm done with this, and he just kind of wanted to be done and let it rest for a while. But then
I think anybody would have wanted out after that experience of having to cut the movie down. And they were like, hey, do you want to do a third one? No, thanks.
But then after a few years of not doing Dark Shadows, then all he ever wanted to do was Dark Shadows again.
After 20 years?
I mean, he did, obviously a couple films. He did the Jack Palance Dracula film. I think that was a made-for-TV movie. Trilogy of Terror.
Jack Palance played Dracula?
Yeah.
When? Like in the 70s or after that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the Jack Palance Dracula film, which has a great score by Bob Covert. Trilogy of Terror with Karen Black.
Oh, he directed that? Dan Curtis directed Trilogy of Terror?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, Dan Curtis, that's one of his most... The Night Stalker, he did as well. the TV movie, The Night Stalker, Darren McGavin. And so, yeah, he did a lot of Dark Shadows type things.
Mm-hmm.
And then he did the Winds of War, which was the super successful miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
And he won, his Emmys or whatnot for that.
And then 1990, 91, he returns to Dark Shadows.
He returns to Dark Shadows.
Is a film or is a series again?
Well, it started out, so they pitched it originally. This is very interesting. People don't understand this about the 1991 Dark Shadows, is it was sold to the general public as a TV movie.
Okay.
They presented it as Dark Shadows, the motion picture. So this is Dark Shadows as it. Yes. Because TV movies were the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then 90s?
After Bewitched, all Elizabeth Montgomery did was TV movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you got literally TV movies were the thing. And I like TV movies. I like TV movies. I like miniseries a lot. And I think it's sort of a lost art form. But nowadays, TV series seasons are so short, they all count as miniseries anyway. But you get this higher budget. You get a bigger budget production. And so it was sort of presented as a mini series, as a made-for-TV movie originally, and you had a really solid cast. I didn't necessarily care for all of the casting choices, but you had this really stellar cast in the 1991 show, and it was sort of Dark Shadows. I think it's the closest to Dan Curtis's ultimate Dark Shadows vision as you're going to get on film, because it's House of Dark Shadows, but with a lot more character development, a lot more extension. And I think that the first few episodes of this thing, the motion picture aspect of it, when it was presented as the miniseries, as the motion picture event, are some of the greatest, most succinct Dark Shadows storytelling that you'll find anywhere, and I think it does a great job of that. And you got some really stellar performances from the cast, but fantastic musical score by Bob Cobert, and just a really
is anyone in the 90s version from the 60s 70s show? Is it a brand new cast?
It's a totally brand new cast. There were Laura Parker, who plays Angelique, obviously. Catherine Lee Scott plays Maggie and Josette. Were both considered for the role of Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, but they went with Gene Simmons.
Oh, okay.
And so, because the character of Liz Stoddard was always sort of this matriarch type character that comes, very famous actress from a different time period. And so Joan Bennett was obviously very big in the golden age of Hollywood. And so they wanted to do the same thing with Liz Stoddard in the 1991, and so they brought Gene Simmons on. She was a huge fan of the original show, so it worked out well. I don't think that, as was the problem in A House of Dark Shadows and later on in the TV series, the character of Liz Stoddard is one of the best characters on Dark Shadows. They did absolutely nothing with this character after Barnabas came. Like, she was this phenomenal talent. Both Joan Bennett and Gene Simmons, really phenomenally talented women, and they just are sort of there for name value, because the original character of Elizabeth Collins Stoddard was super complicated, really well acted, well written character. And I think that if they were to bring Dark Shadows back, you would want to have an Elizabeth Collins Stoddard that really sort of, which I think was one of the good things about the Tim Burton film, is they gave Michelle Pfeiffer, who played Liz Stoddard in that film, a lot more to do. And I think that was, I give him credit for doing that, for elevating the character back to its original status. So the 1991 series is the closest you're going to get to the ultimate version of Dark Shadows. But I would say that if you saw a finished cut of Night of Dark Shadows that had Dan Curtis's vision in place,
I would watch it if it came out.
You would have a pretty close second to an ultimate version of Dark Shadows. I think it's what better time
to bring out the longer cut than this year, the 50th anniversary. Right?
That's right.
I mean, after this year, what other reason gonna have to bring it out?
Warner Brothers, I know that you just hobbled together this artwork on your DVD release to coincide with your your Johnny Depp release, but I mean, you really could have taken some time to put some bonus features on this, or
deleted
something.
footage or something.
Yeah, it's not like there isn't a whole bunch of deleted footage lying around. It's not like there's a whole bunch of it's not like there's like a whole bunch of dubbing, lying around.
You know who should get this, Jonathan, is Scream Factory. Scream Factory Blu-rays are awesome, and they usually have like brand new audio commentaries, deleted scenes. They have behind the scenes stuff. I don't think Scream Factory has done anything related to Dark Shadows, and they've been around since 2012. Kind of curious to know if that's in the pipeline at all.
I think that would be a phenomenal option, but the problem is that Warner's just doesn't give it up.
Oh, because it's Warner Brothers.
They just hold on to
this
Dark Shadows property, and MGM has held on to the Dark Shadows property, and then when Warner bought that whole part of MGM, all the 1970 and before stuff for MGM back in the 90s, they just have not given it up. And so they just hold the film rights to Dark Shadows. They hold all of the stuff for it, and it's really impossible to do anything because they refuse to do anything.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
I think that it's extremely frustrating.
You should get on the phone with them.
I should. I should be like Barnabas. I should be caning.
You should say, all right, so giving you this episode of Film at 50, we talk about this, and
take my glasses.
It's very upsetting, and we want to see the extended cut of Night of Dark Shadows.
If you don't, Barnabas is going to get you.
And was that the last Dark Shadows property that Dan Curtis was a part of, the 91 project?
No, he was constantly trying to bring it back.
Or did so after that is the next thing after that the Tim Burton movie?
No, well, officially yes, but there was a 2000 pilot script that was produced. It wasn't produced; it was written. It was a pilot script that was written in 2000, and then in 2004 it went to pilot at the Warner Brothers network.
Like they shot CW? The pilot?
the CW.
Oh, yeah. For the CW, Dark Shadows?
For the CW, yeah.
Like a Vampire Diaries kind of thing?
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. I'm not a huge fan of it. They had an original director for the thing that was really good, and then he left, and they replaced it with this other guy who didn't know anything about Dark Shadows at all.
Okay.
And he literally was like, no, get rid of Barnabas's cane, get rid of Barnabas's ring, like everything that made Barnabas. And then let's put red floodlights in every scene. Mm-hmm. So if you want, the pilot's out there and you can watch it.
Oh, cool.
It appears on YouTube every now and then, but it's an interesting thing. I think it has some good potential, but it's definitely not Dark Shadows as we're used to. And so then after that CW event, Dan Curtis died. Because he was always the guy that was trying to bring Dark Shadows back, but he died after the CW event, and so then it landed in the hands of Johnny Depp, who was
a fan of the original series.
Was a fan of the original series, and the original Dark Shadows as scripted for the Johnny Depp film was really quite stellar because it was a super gothic, very serious vampire film.
Before Tim Burton came on?
Well, yeah, but I think it even might have maintained some of that flavor, but they made him change it because of Twilight.
Oh, right. Twilight, the film, started coming out in 2008.
And they didn't want people to say this is a copy of Twilight.
Okay.
So it's unfortunate because that original script, and I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but I have talked to people who have read it and seen the treatment, and it sounds really interesting. Sounds like a super interesting movie that never got made. Because they brought in the Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter guy to make it funny.
Oh.
Like, he did all of the script rewrites, and you're like, let's make this a comedy.
Yeah, the final version by Tim Burton is funny, right? Whereas there's really nothing funny in the early incarnations of the story.
Every now and then you get some, there's some humorous characters. There's some funny quips from Roger Collins, from Julia Hoffman. I mean, they all have and David Selby's Quentin Collins is one of the funniest characters, but it's
Not in Night of Dark Shadows. He's not very funny in the movie.
No. But in the TV series, he has some really good lines.
Oh, good.
One of my favorite lines is he wants to go off. Oh, one of the people that he is having an affair with, Beth Chavez. She's one of the servants at Collinwood, and she's like, "We need to go. We could like get away from this. We could, take a trip." And David Selby responds, "The only trip we're going to take is to hell." So there's humor there, right? It's funny stuff that's written into the script, but it's not an outright comedy. So, and then Dan Curtis did change the character of Willie Loomis in the 1991 show. Jim Fife plays Willie Loomis to be the comic relief, because that show was a lot bloodier and more and darker. It was a really cold. I described the 1991 series as very cold. There's not a lot of.
I'm curious to see the 91 version.
Yeah, you should watch it. I think there's extremely high production values. I think there's very good acting. Ben Cross plays Barnabas. He's not my favorite Barnabas in the world, but because he's super cold.
Okay.
Whereas Barnabas on the TV series is not cold.
Mm-hmm.
And then Barbara Steele plays Julia Hoffman. And she is also very cold. And she commented, too, that she did not like her Julia Hoffman as much as Grayson Hall's, because she was a fan of the original show, too. Part of the problem with Julia Hoffman in that 1991 remake is Dan Curtis brought Sam Hall and his son, Matthew Hall, on board to write the series.
Oh, Sam Hall wrote the 91 version, too?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he brought them back, but Grayson Hall had just died
a year
before.
Oh, so she could have been in it.
And well, she could have, but Dan Curtis kept playing the old episodes. Mm-hmm. And, because they're like, we need this part, we need this part, we need, this stuff. And Sam Hall had a really tough time with that because it's his wife, right? And he's just hearing his wife's voice and seeing his wife's face over and over and over again. And I think that was part of the problem why Julia Hoffman didn't translate as well in those 1991 scripts.
Interesting.
But yeah.
All really interesting, Jonathan. Getting back to Night of Dark Shadows, just maybe touch on a few more things. There were some scenes we haven't really mentioned. I really like the scene where he sees the vision of that other character, but it's really his wife. Yeah. And he's drowning her in that pool, and she's like fighting for her life, and he just sees this other being, and he doesn't realize what he's doing. I thought that was a well-handled scene. I like that. I like the scene where he goes into that greenhouse. There was a definite like gothic quality to that, and I kind of knew, I'm like, okay, this place does not look like a building you want to be in, like because of the glass. And then there it is, like the glass fell within a minute he was walking around, and I like that scene. There were a couple moments that made me cringe, like that scene where it's Quentin to Tracy, right, where he says, "I'll touch you whenever and however I want."
Yeah.
That's whoa.
That of course is Charles Collins taking possession. You got a 1810 guy, thinking of women as property at that particular point, and he sees, and we know that he doesn't see Tracy when he looks at Tracy when he's Charles. We know from later on in the film that he sees her as Laura Collins, his original wife, right? And so that's one of the things that I think is sort of muddled in the cuts, because
needed more explanation.
There would have a lot more explanation if you got to see the whole script.
Yeah, I like the bit where Tracy finds the painting that has Quentin like in the painting. That was cool. And then I talked about the car chase, and that knife fight at the end is great. And then her like just was it a shovel? She just slams that guy over the edge.
I don't even know. It was like some big.
It's something
piece
big.
Of wood or something. It was this big hunk of wood, and she's like, "Gerard!" And then she goes, "Boom!" And then he was supposed to fly off and get fried. Like they actually talk about his charred body in the script, but
Oh, there you go. Happened. Yeah. And then I won't give it away, but the final scene with Carlotta is also kind of eerie. The way that happened really fast. I felt like there was probably a scene or two left out. I was like, okay.
Oh, there were tons of scenes left out. Like that
Carlotta.
What originally was supposed to happen is she was supposed to interfere with the seance that was taking place, the exorcism that was taking place. And then that's where all of that would stem from. And so, because it doesn't make a lot of sense the way that it's presented now. Like, we're going to go in the house and we're going to find Carlotta. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Why?
Good for you.
Okay.
Good for you. And so it doesn't make sense why what happens afterward, right? But if you saw the original edit of it, it would make a lot more sense. But yeah.
And then I would like to see that longer end scene. I think the end scene we get in the movie now, it's still pretty effective. I love the way it's shot and cut together. Her seeing her husband across the way in darkness, and she knows something's wrong, and his kind of walk towards her, and the camera zooming in on her eyes, which are getting big. And like, I thought it was, even though I wasn't quite following it as well as I could have, I thought that like the way it was shot and cut like was pretty solid. Like the last 2 minutes.
Compare it to the end of Burnt Offerings. Like watch this scene and then watch this scene. Well, then when we watch Burnt Offerings, watch this. Yeah, watch, because it's a good film. I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
If you watch this end and compare it to the end of Burnt Offerings, and that was a 5-year difference.
Yeah, in 76, right?
In Dan Curtis's directing.
So I bet he's improved a lot. Yeah.
Sort of interesting. Well, that's what I was talking about, the weird camera angles. Dan Curtis has this trademark. He shoots everything from a low angle. Like, it's a Dan Curtis production when everything is shot from this low angle, and it's just sort of this interesting trademark that he has. And so, yeah, I think that in this film, though, he really sort of got to develop that flavor of, how to shoot a movie.
And I thought the actors were solid. I thought David Selby and Kate Jackson, I was like, have I seen Kate Jackson in a film before? Like, her face looked familiar, so I've probably seen her in something. I know she's famous for being a Charlie's Angel, but I thought she was solid. I mean, the script only gives them so much. I mean, but they're good and kind of fun to watch. I like Selby's. He's kind of getting, more and more into like madness, and we're not quite sure exactly who he is by the end. And like, I thought he played that really well. And just her kind of like, oh my God, like there was a lot of that in the movie, it was, and then there's Grayson Hall, which she was my favorite part of House. And I thought for the little that she is in Night, I was really happy to see her again. She's got such an interesting look, and her voice and the way she carries herself, always great. I was a little confused for, I'm like, wait, is she playing the same character from House? It wasn't clear to me, and I had to look it up, and I'm like, oh, it's 2 different people. Okay. But that was just like a weird, like for someone who's not that familiar with the series, that was weird to see. Like, okay, so this isn't really a direct sequel, but it's got an actress from the other movie, but she's playing a different character. That was just very confusing. I was like, okay, it is like an American Horror Story kind of.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where the AHS people got it from. It was all inspired by Dark Shadows and how they did their productions.
Yeah, and we've talked about on the podcast before, horror films of the early 70s, not the greatest. This is better than some other ones I've looked at. It's not in the top tier, I would say. But, if you're interested in this series at all, and you're intrigued about the films, I mean, I think once you research it and find out that there's like 35, 40 minutes missing, does kind of, I didn't find that out until after I'd watched the movie. I wonder if I had read that before I started it, if I had really been paying more attention to, like, I wonder what was cut. Maybe it would have been a worse time, but going into it cold, I thought it was pretty solid. I'd give it like kind of a polite 3 stars, like, for what it is. I had a better time than I did in House of Dark Shadows, even though House had a little bit more like cool production value. That scene at the end of House, there's a lot of like cool colors and the vampire and the mist, and there was some like neat stuff in that movie too. But on the whole, I was more engaged in Night than I was in House.
Yeah.
So if they were to make this movie today, Jonathan, in 2021, how would Night of Dark Shadows be different, do you think?
Well, for some reason, story. they always have to put Barnabas in everything now. So if it has Dark Shadows, they always have to insert Barnabas. So Barnabas would be in the film.
That's So I was like, either it's called Night of Dark Shadows and Barnabas is in it, or if there's no Barnabas, then they just take out Dark Shadows and they make it just this other thing, right? To make it less confusing for the audience.
Yep.
But then it's like, okay, well then why even update it if it's not going to be a Dark Shadows? Why not just create something different?
I think it's a phenomenal story. Like, it's a really unique story because it's kind of like Rebecca, but it's not Rebecca.
A little bit of Rebecca.
I think it's in many ways, for horror, it's an improvement. over Rebecca, right? Because Rebecca does fine for what it is, but I think that this particular story improves upon the Rebecca story in a lot of ways, and I think that you could have had because Carlotta's one of my favorite lines in the film is when Carlotta turns to Tracy and she says something along the lines of, "Do you really think you belong here?" You know, it's just a great delivery.
Oh, I love. Was that part of was that the scene where she's telling him like, "You need to get your wife out of here," and he's like, "Well, I don't know if I can do that," and she's like, "Well, you're going to have to leave too." Because the two of you cannot stay here together. It's very eerie, and then she just like leaves the room, and he's like, "What?"
Yeah,
that was good.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that. So I think that it would be I think you could take this script pretty much as it's written, and except for the one complaint that I have with the Carlotta explaining the flashback scene, I think you could take this script and I think you could produce it today, and I think would
it make any sense to an audience?
Yeah, and I think it would go over well. I think it would go over well.
And call it Night of Dark Shadows?
You can call it anything you want because I think the story's solid. I think it's a very solid story. I really like this story.
Right. I mean, I guess you could. I mean, there's no reference to Barnabas or vampires, really. It is just kind of like the standalone story. You could just do it again with the same characters and make it scarier and do some other stuff and make the 2-hour cut that Dan Curtis wanted. That could be kind of cool, like for a Netflix movie or something.
Yeah, I think it's the script is high quality. There's a lot you can do with this and the story, and so I'd like to see it done, because if for no other reason than to actually get that finished,
finally get it that way.
Yeah, because I think it's a really good story.
Yeah. Very cool. Anything else before we move to our final two segments about Night of Dark Shadows? I feel like in these 2 episodes, Jonathan, I think we've covered Dark Shadows pretty well. Outside of doing a full-on podcast.
We could do this for hours, Brian.
Oh, yeah. No, that's very cool. All right, so that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one's called the Divine Double Feature. That's where we pick a more modern film to pair with our movie today. So Night of Dark Shadows ends after 94 minutes. What do you suggest someone put on right after that's a little bit newer, more modern?
So it's kind of hard to find a true gothic horror film in the modern age, right? And so when you think of that's why last time with House of Dark Shadows, I picked The Woman in Black.
Right.
But so I think that, if you were doing something because this is a ghost story, and this is a story about possession. So I think you could probably pick something from the Conjuring universe,
That might be my choice.
Oh, it is!
Conjuring 2. The Conjuring 2, which is my favorite of them. I just saw the third one recently and was very disappointed. It wasn't that scary.
Don't give it away. Don't give it away. I want to see that one.
And you could tell it was a different director. That's all I'll say, because James Wan is firing on all cylinders in The Conjuring 2. Yeah. We saw The Conjuring 1 together, right?
Yes, we did.
You sat next to me, and I was like, "Be prepared. When I jump in a movie, my arms go every which way, and you might get a little bruised." And I didn't jump one time.
Yeah,
in the first one, and I was kind of disappointed in that. I liked it. I still think it's a good film, but I wasn't jumping out of my seat. And then I go see The Conjuring 2 with little expectations. I'm just like, okay. And then, that film is terrifying. There were 5 or 6 parts where I was like out of my seat, like screaming. It was so scary and just really well done from top to bottom, really creepy. And one of the scariest movies I've seen in the theater for sure in the last 10 years. I think after this, it is such like a haunted house story, ghost story. Be kind of cool to look at like something a little bit more modern that's also kind of about a haunted house, a haunting. And so I went with Conjuring 2, which I think is a better choice than my Divine Double Feature pick for House of Dark Shadows for you, right? Which was Dark
100% improvement over
the 2012 Tim Burton Johnny Depp movie.
No, we do not talk about that, Brian.
Well, at the time I was like, I feel like because House was about Barnabas, I thought it's kind of interesting to look at a film made in 70 and then a film made in 2012 and just how radically different they are, you know, two completely different styles and directors. And, you know, I mean, the cast in the 2012 version is so stacked with great talent and big names.
Yeah, I know.
But I thought it's kind of an
interesting. It would have turned out better.
It's, yeah. I mean, I gave it 3 stars. I haven't wanted to see it a second time. So I guess that's saying something. But at the time, Tim Burton was on a roll of some really bad films. Like, I mean, not all of them. Sweeney Todd was okay. I really did not enjoy Alice in Wonderland. I struggled in that one. And I just thought Dark Shadows was at least a little bit more leaning towards some of the better films he was doing in the 80s and early 90s. Not a great movie by any means.
I think it's a fine film. I just don't think it should be called Dark Shadows.
Yeah, just be called Shadow.
Just call it, you know, the vampire comes back or something.
The vampire returns. But yeah, Conjuring 2, much better film. And anytime, you know, people have asked me, like, what are some good horror films of the last 10 years? And I always say The Conjuring 2, I think, was pretty great.
I like that.
And that's a good one to kind of lead us into our final segment, Beyond the Flick, because our final chat, Jonathan, is about our favorite horror movie sequels.
Oh, my goodness.
Speaking of The Conjuring 2, that is a great horror sequel. I think it's way better than the original, which is usually not the case. Usually in horror films, the original's the best, and then the sequels, some of them are better than others, but very few of them like are better than the original. The Conjuring 2 is a rare exception. What are your favorite sequels? So I have my 3 favorites here, and I have like 6, 7 more runners up, going all the way back to Bride of Frankenstein, which is on my runners up, surprisingly enough. I mean, it's very close to number 3 because I love that movie. But all the way back to the 30s to now, like, what are some of your favorite horror movie sequels? If you had to pick a few, you're just thinking about it now.
I like, well, no, there's just a lot to choose.
There's a lot, yeah.
Like, I really, like, Bride of Frankenstein is a phenomenal film. I prefer Son of Frankenstein.
Really? Okay, I haven't heard that very much before. Like, for me, the best of all the Universal Monster movies is Bride. I feel like it builds on the original. I feel like it's funnier. It's got some, you know, scary moments. I love the pacing of it, and having him able to talk, and how that comes into the emotional finale. I just think it works really well.
Bride is a beautiful film. Mm-hmm. Like it is a
Son of Frankenstein film. I have not seen in a long time. I've wanted to revisit it because Boris Karloff is in the third one. With Bela Lugosi. He is the monster in the third one with Lugosi.
Yep.
I just don't remember anything outside of like a couple vague scenes that I remember. But like, what do you like so much about the Son of Frankenstein?
Well, so Bride of Frankenstein is Karloff's film.
Yep.
And Son of Frankenstein is Lugosi's film.
Oh, okay. Who does Lugosi play in
Igor?
Son? Igor. Okay.
Yeah. So the whole story is it's Igor's story. And it's a really well done film. Like, it is of all of the Frankenstein films, it is the most modern looking film. Like, you can watch this film and you're like, oh, this was like filmed. You could probably film this today. Mm-hmm. There's some pacing issues here and there, but you could probably put this in the movie theater today, and because it looks great, it sounds great. It's a very modern looking piece of Universal cinema. Mm-hmm. It's even though it was 2 years before the Wolfman, it still holds up better than the Wolfman, I think.
Okay.
In many ways. And so I like that because I think it's pretty accessible for people who are getting into the Universal films. Because if you watch James Whale's original Frankenstein, you know, people love that film, but it's kind of technically rough.
Technically
in a lot
rough
of areas.
Yep.
In a lot of areas.
It's 31. I mean, pretty much any film released in like 1930, 1931, they're a little rough.
I think Dracula looks really good and from a technical standpoint.
Technically, Dracula, I would agree, is a little bit more polished on a technical level.
On a technical level. Yeah. And a lot of people prefer Frankenstein, saying that, well, no, it's just, you know, it's better directed or whatnot. But I think that Dracula actually, in spite of the fact that it is like filming a stage play, the directing is way more polished, and the cinematography is way more polished than Frankenstein. But then you get to Bride of Frankenstein, and James Whale has the opportunity to follow up. And I think it's a really phenomenal film. Like, I love Bride of Frankenstein. I just prefer Son of Frankenstein.
Whale didn't direct Son, right? That's someone else?
No, he didn't. He didn't direct Son of Frankenstein. But the Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, that's the Frankenstein proper. That's the story before, it gets all...
Yeah, it is kind of neat that Karloff played the monster 3 times in 31, 35, 39. So it's like... the 30s, it's like bookended with parts 1 and 3, and then part 2 right in the middle. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, I have tremendous respect for
I wonder if Karloff had any trepidation of coming back for Son without director James Whale. You think he would have been like, I did everything I could do with that character in those first 2 films. Did they just pay him a lot of money? Like, did he really want to do the third one? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know if he wanted to do the third one. I know that after the third one, he said that I've done everything.
I'm done. Yeah,
I have done everything I possibly can.
I'd be curious to know, like, his thinking of doing. Was he contractually obligated? Were they just paying him a lot? And he said, "Well, I'll do one more go around." You think by 38 he would have been like, "I've done that character twice. I'm done." Oh, James Whale's not coming back? No thanks.
I mean, the monster, as he has a complicated relationship with the monster. Mm-hmm. But his it was his baby. Like, the monster was his baby, and he considered the monster to be, his best friend. Mm-hmm. But his relationship is complicated because there was a lot of typecasting that went along with Karloff and horror and the Frankenstein monster.
Yeah.
Not as badly as Lugosi with Dracula, and part of the reason is because Lugosi's face was Dracula's face, whereas you had the Jack Pierce makeup to help with the Karloff typecasting.
So what are some other favorite horror sequels?
Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And that's
what is that a sequel to?
A sequel to all of the Universal films.
Like, is there a specific film? It's a sequel. It's just like a sequel to a bunch of
Dracula,
stuff.
Frankenstein, and the Wolfman.
Okay.
Yeah, I love Abbott and Costello Meet.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
I think it's a phenomenal film. And
because they made a lot of films together, Abbott and Costello. That's the one I've seen and that I know. Like, I think aren't there like 10, 12 others? Yeah, there's a lot. Didn't they meet the Mummy too?
They met the Mummy.
Didn't they meet Boris Karloff?
Jekyll. They met Boris Karloff.
Boris Karloff.
The killer Boris Karloff. The killer
Boris Karloff. Yes.
The killer Boris Karloff. Yeah.
Yeah. Frankenstein's great.
Yeah. So Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I really like Halloween 4.
The Return of Michael Myers?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's on my list. I love the fourth one.
Halloween 4. Yep, I love Halloween 4.
Yeah, I have Halloween here 4 times. So I love Halloween 2 from 1981 because it's like a direct sequel continuation of the night.
I know,
think
it's
that's cool.
Really awesome that it takes place on the same
it's
night.
Not as good as the original. It has flaws. Every time I watch it, I'm kind of like, it could be better. Like, if they had if Carpenter directed it and really just said, you know what, we'll do one more, let's go all in. And I mean, it is the same night, so it kind of makes sense that Carpenter should have directed the second one too, but he was busy doing other projects at the time. I get it. It makes sense. So it's like, it is a little frustrating, Halloween 2, because you're like, oh man, with just a little bit more, like, it could have been great. Yeah. And it's just like really good, but that's okay. Jamie Lee Curtis has kind of a noticeable wig, and she doesn't really get a whole lot to do in the second one. She's just like at the hospital running and screaming.
I know. I think it's interesting the way they scripted it.
But I love the setting. I love the hospital setting at night. Mm-hmm. It's very eerie. I really like that. It is very
eerie.
And Dean Cundy shot it, the same guy who shot Halloween 1, and the widescreen, and it's got almost like a 70s vibe to it more than it does an 80s one. It just it feels like it's one of like the last 70s movies, even though it came out in 81.
My major problem with it is literally at the end of Halloween, everyone is asleep and in bed. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, the whole town is awake.
Oh yeah,
everybody's out, and everybody's walking around and having a great time. I mean, that's what happens when you take it to Universal, I guess. They're just like, put in more actors, put in, whatever. And just like, wow, this is just kind of weird because I love the, well, it bothers me. I love the sequence where, the lady asked Harold if he wants mayonnaise on his sandwich.
Would you like mayonnaise on your sandwich?
On your sandwich, Harold? Harold, you want mayonnaise
and he's
on your sandwich?
He's watching the movie that's always playing on TV, Night of the Living Dead, because it's in the public domain, right?
That's right.
You can just play it in any horror film. They're watching a horror movie. It's Night of the Living Dead because they don't have to get the right.
I know.
I made a movie in 2007 where it's like a creepy little flick of this guy watching TV and going insane, and it's Night of the Living Dead. And I remember I sent it into this contest, and this guy emails me. He's like, "Do you have the rights to that footage on the television that he watches?" I said, "Why, yes, I do. It's in the public domain." So yeah, you see that a lot, but it's Night of the Living Dead's so great. It's like a really cool movie that you're able to use any way you want.
Yeah.
I like Halloween 2. Halloween 4, the opening images and eerie sounds of just the opening 90 seconds is so great. Like I'll be, in mid-October, I'll put on AMC and their Halloween 4 is starting. I will stop whatever I'm doing. At least I'll watch the opening. It's so good.
Yeah, I really enjoy Halloween 4.
Yeah.
I like Halloween 4 better than 2.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Halloween 4 is just a little better of a film than Halloween 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I know it's, it also has problems. I really like H2O. Like I really love that Jamie Lee Curtis came back for that. And, the last 20 minutes where she kicks ass is a lot of fun. And
it would have been
last
nice
scene
if
is
Donald
so
Pleasance.
Great. Okay, Donald Pleasance had passed away in 95. Imagine if he had lived another 5 years and he had appeared. Imagine if he had appeared in the last part of that movie. It would have been so cool.
It would have been awesome.
And the ending is so fantastic. Her chopping off his head.
I know.
Ruined in Resurrection by the whole explanation that it's like this other guy. And I feel like the series is so messed up at this point. We've had 2 Rob Zombie remakes. The 2018 film did away with everything except the original. So it's so just out of whack at this point that I kind of like to watch H2O on its own as like the finale of that story and pretend Resurrection doesn't exist, right? Yeah. Because the other one I would put on my list is 2018's Halloween, which also has some issues. When I watched it the second time at home, I was like, okay, there's some things in this I don't love. But for the most part, I was very happy with that movie. And I am very excited to see Halloween Kills in October, which brings back a lot of characters from the original movie, including like the 2 kids and the nurse, and Sheriff Brackett is in the new movie.
Oh, cool.
Same actor.
Wow.
Charles cool. Cyphers, who I believe retired from movies 15 years ago. Like they brought him back for a day or 2 and he's in the new one. So I'm really excited for Halloween Kills. That comes out in October.
Yes. And I mean, it's a shame that, got pushed back and everything because of
we would have seen it by now. Yeah, it was coming out in October. They shot it in the fall of 2019. It was coming out in October. I think the movie was done and ready in like June of 2020.
I think
and they've just had to hold it. So, but yeah, I'm excited to see that. And I guess there's going to be one more called Halloween Ends in 2022.
I know.
So we'll see what that's all about.
I hope they're able to get it all shot before anything, bad happens.
I'm just like, when I saw Halloween Resurrection, I thought, man, that's the last time Jamie Lee Curtis is going to play Laurie Strode. And what a sad way to go out.
I know.
And you know what? She came back to the character. I mean, what are the odds? I mean, that was just brilliant. Like, okay, how about we do a new one with Jamie Lee and we just say these other sequels don't exist? And what a cool way to bring her back again. So I'm happy that her final appearance on film and that with that character is not Resurrection.
Oh my God. Yep. You and me both.
All right. So some other runners up here, Jonathan. Yeah, we don't talk about that one. No. So Friday the 13th. I don't know if you like those movies. I think the best of the sequel. Yeah. Okay. Friday the 13th series. It's not my favorite next to like Nightmare and Halloween, which I just think are better and more fun.
They are.
I do really like the fourth Friday the 13th, the final chapter with Crispin Glover dancing it up and Corey Haim. No, not Corey Haim, but the other one, Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman is the kid in the movie, and kind of the trajectory of his character and what happens to him at the end, I think is really interesting. I like some of the sequels more than others. Part 3 is a lot of fun. Freddy versus Jason's a lot of fun. I think the best of the Friday the 13th sequels is the fourth one. But you don't like those movies at all?
Well, I haven't even been able to get through number 1.
You can't get through. You've watched all of Dark Shadows, 1,200 episodes. You can't watch all of Friday the 13th?
Multiple times, yeah. No, the characters in this Friday the 13th are so vapid.
Very one-dimensional, and you have to get past it. It's a series about how do we kill off the next teenager.
See, if I am dead tired, like you just have to tell me, you have to get me on a night where I'm dead tired, and I just don't feel like doing anything, but I can't go to sleep. You have to call and say, Jonathan,
Friday the 13th.
It's the time, Friday the 13th.
They're fun.
then I might do it, yeah.
Oh, I think they're fun.
I've tried a couple times.
There's not a whole lot going on. That's the problem. It's like, okay. And it does some weird things, like in part 7, like the main character is like she can like move things with her mind, and she uses that to get back at Jason at the end. So like they do some crazy stuff. He goes to New York.
Yeah. I know. I remember that one from the VHS section at Blockbuster.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
And from the commentary on the Blu-ray disc, I think the director said like they only had a few days to actually shoot in New York, so most of the movie's on a cruise ship. He's not even in New York very much until the very end.
It's so weird that this character of Jason Voorhees is such a I have great respect for the character of Jason Voorhees, and and I have some Jason stuff too, right?
Yeah. I have Jason like memorabilia in your house.
Yeah.
But you can't get through the first movie.
No. And it's because he is elevated like Freddy and Michael and Sam and all.
So you don't know who the killer is in the first movie?
No, I do.
Okay. Because it's not Jason.
Well, all you have to do is watch Scream to get the answer to that.
That's true.
So, and I got my Ghostface. I got my new NECA Ghostface figure in the mail.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Scream in a minute. Yeah. So a couple others on my runners up. I don't know if you would consider Aliens a horror film. It's more science fiction, but that's an example of a great, genre sequel. I just love that movie so much.
I think a lot of people put it in horror.
It's kind of horror, science fiction. It's kind of a mix of both. Evil Dead 2 is really fun because it's basically just a remake. It's the same movie except with a lot more effects and a bigger budget. Yep. So that was fun. That was cool. Nightmare on Elm Street series. I love Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Like of that original few sequels, like from like 85 to 89, they made 4 sequels very quick. And I think the best of them is the third one. That's the one that Wes Craven came back and scripted, at least. He co-wrote the script of the third one. Has some interesting
I'm trying to remember the third one. I remember the second one a lot, but I'm trying to remember
the second one's the gay one. And then the third one is Nancy comes back, the Heather Langenkamp comes back, and she's like a counselor now, and it's like at an institution where they're all having these nightmares, and she's working with these kids.
Oh yeah.
So I like the look of that film, and it's got some great kills and good scares in it, and some good stuff. And then let's see, The Devil's Rejects, which I sometimes don't really think of as a sequel, but really it is kind of a sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses. Rob Zombie ruined Halloween for a while there, so I'm not usually praising Zombie very much on here, but I do think the one film he made that I love, and that's The Devil's Rejects, it was on my top 10 list of 2005.
What do you think he's going to do with the Munsters?
I just heard that. That's very odd. That's an interesting choice.
I don't know what I mean, after seeing what he did with Halloween, which I was extremely dissatisfied with. I mean, I'm
that's
really
the
scared.
Most angry film review I ever wrote in my life. It was like 25 paragraphs long of like why this movie is a disaster.
I'm super scared for the Munsters. Like, I'm really scared.
The hardest part about Zombies Halloween and Halloween 2 is that in 2014 they brought out the box set of the Halloween series, and it's one of my favorite box sets. It's got like tons of new bonus features, a lot of cool stuff. but then it sits there on my shelf with the 2 zombie movies at the end of the box set, and I just, you take it out and there's like a big space. I'm like, maybe I could get like a Laurie Strode action figure and like put it
That's right
in the space and then burn the 2 zombie. I don't know.
Well, they're gonna have to come out with a new one after the third new Halloween film. So then they'll just be in the middle and you won't even notice them.
Yeah. And then Saw, like, it's been a long time since I've watched those movies. I remember thinking Saw 2 and 3 were pretty great. And then Saw 6, I remember, was thematically kind of interesting. They went in a new direction. Paranormal Activity, I want to say the third one was the best of those that I saw. The third one was like a prequel more than it was a sequel, but I remember that one was pretty cool, had some interesting ideas. And then The Conjuring 2 from 2016. I'm like, in the last 10 years, I'm like, what's a really good horror sequel besides Conjuring 2? And I'm going blank. I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all those Conjuring movies like in the universe, like Annabelle, and some of those are pretty solid. But I think the most recent sequel that I really loved was Conjuring 2 in the horror genre. So that takes me to my top 3 favorites. Do you have any other favorites that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, you might bring some up. You might bring some up.
So number 3.
I do have one.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I do have one. Dracula, Prince of Darkness, which we talked about earlier.
Dracula, Prince of Darkness. Okay.
Which I think is a superior film to horror of Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I really like Dracula, Prince of Darkness is I think it's a really cool story. But the weird thing about it is Christopher Lee didn't say anything in the film.
Oh, okay.
As Dracula, he refused to say the dialogue.
Easy paycheck?
No, he just didn't like the dialogue. He thought it was terrible. He kept saying, "Why don't you use Stoker's dialogue? Why don't you Hammer? Why don't you ever like draw from the books?" And because the stuff that you're writing is terrible, I'm not going to say it. So he just literally looked moody and hissed throughout the whole film. But I think it's a really good Dracula film.
Cool. I would love to talk about one of the Christopher Lee Draculas. If there's another one coming in 72, that might be a fun one.
Yeah.
One other I just remembered while you were saying that I forgot to mention was Psycho 2.
Oh yeah.
With Anthony Perkins, a movie that you would think would be horrible, and it's actually really solid. Like, it's actually a really interesting sequel.
Yeah,
he gets out of the insane asylum or whatever he's in after 22, 23 years, and he's trying to get back to normal life, and it's the same house, and
I know.
And then things start to go awry, and you're like, what's happening here? And the last scene is really creepy, and there's some good stuff in that sequel. 3 is not my favorite, a movie that Anthony Perkins directed. And then Psycho 4, the beginning, is a prequel that takes us to like, kind of does what the Bates Motel series would do later, like taking us to Norman as a younger character.
I've only seen 2 and 3. I haven't actually.
Oh, if you're interested in Psychos, watch the 4th one. It's actually pretty good. I think there's like cheap copies you can find online.
Okay.
So yeah, Psycho 2 though, really, really good. So my third favorite, it's tough for me to pick a favorite Scream sequel. So I kind of like put 2, 3, and 4 as kind of a tie, because I really do. I think 3 is a little bit lesser than 2 and 4, but for me, 2 and 4
I didn't really like 3 that much.
Are very close. Like if I had to pick a favorite sequel, I guess I would go with 2, just because it's directly made after the first one. It's got everybody. I think Courtney Cox's best performance in the series is 2. I just think she is great in the second one, and I love her look. And Sydney in college, and we get Jamie Kennedy back as Randy. He's not obviously in the 4th one. He's like in one scene of the 3rd one, kind of. But we do get a lot of Randy in part 2, which is great. So I think if I had to pick the best of the 3 sequels, I guess I go with Scream 2. And I love Laurie Metcalf. It's amazing in the second one. And, her reveal at the end is great. And I'm not a big fan of like the stuff on stage, like when she's doing that, like Greek.
That was kind of weird.
Not great. And I remember going into Scream 4 with not the highest expectations. It had been 11 years. And I'm like, Brian, just be prepared. It might not be great. And I really enjoy the 4th one. Again, not perfect. There's some parts that are kind of like slow and some lulls in it, but like I love the ending, and I love the reveal of the killer and why she's killing. I thought was very Like I thought that made sense for 2011. I was like, okay.
Yeah, I think most of the Scream sequels are fairly respectable.
Yeah, but even the third one, which is for most people the least of the 4 films, I still have a lot of fun with it. And it's more of a comedy. It's more of a Scooby-Doo thriller than it is a horror film like the other ones, but it's fun.
But I mean, I think that part of the reason that Scream sequels can be more successful than other films is because, you know, the first one kind of has its tongue firmly implanted in his cheek, you know, right from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, and so it sets that mood, and
nothing has beat the first scene of Scream 1. That's still the best scene of the whole franchise. That scene is great.
Yep. And so it's just really a very interesting take on horror films, and I really respect it a lot.
And I'm very, very, very excited to see what they do with Scream 5 coming in January.
Oh, it's January. Okay.
Yeah, so they shot it in the fall of 2020. Like during COVID, they shot it. And Neve Campbell was like, it was kind of like, I think with 4 too. Like it was like for months, we were like, is Campbell going to come back and play Sidney again? And she is in the new version. Now they're calling it Scream. It's not called Scream 5. And I was really upset about this. And then a friend of mine pointed out, I think it was on the podcast at some point, said, you know, I think it might be called Scream because it'll be like, you know, a reboot about a reboot, and it'll be like a meta thing. And so I'm like, well, as long as they're playing the same characters, it's not like Night of Dark Shadows where Sidney Prescott shows up, but it's not Sidney, it's some other character. I'll be like, what? Like I'm like, oh, maybe they're playing like Neve Campbell will be playing Neve Campbell as Sidney or something. I'm like, okay, I don't know. But that's coming in January. Fingers crossed. It's the directors of Ready or Not, which I finally watched a few months ago and I thought was great. So I'm like, okay, they're in good hands. So that's the Scream films. My number 2 favorite horror sequel is Dawn of the Dead. Have you seen Dawn of the Dead?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You think? What I love about Dawn of the Dead is that it builds on the original. Night of the Living Dead's very much like set in that house. It's very claustrophobic and very indie. And then Dawn of the Dead goes
it the mall
bigger.
One?
They go to the mall.
It's the mall one, yeah.
And it's a much bigger, epic kind of horror film that I love.
Yeah. The zombie films, not Rob Zombie, but like zombie movies in
George
general.
Romero.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously Night of the Living Dead is phenomenal, but zombies are not my favorite monster.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's really disgusting.
Okay.
Like, there's parts at the end of Dawn of the Dead where I have to like look away. It's really gross, but I just like that he could have gone smaller with the second one. And 10 years later, he's like, no, I'm going to go big with this and see where this, you know, the series can take me here. And I just think he does a lot of cool stuff in the second one. I'm not a big fan of Day of the Dead, the third one from the 80s. That one is just kind of ugly. Not my favorite, but I do love Dawn of the Dead. All right, so that takes us to my favorite horror movie sequel. If I had to pick my favorite horror sequel, I would go with Wes Craven's New Nightmare from 1994.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
I have.
That movie to me is just brilliant. I just love what he did with that. I mean, it was a movie that was never going to do well at the box office. It's too weird and too meta. Meta before Scream, 2 years before Scream. Yeah. Wes Craven does this cool thing of like, let's do a sequel where we examine the lives of the actors and the director of the original movie.
It was a very interesting film.
What if, because, you know, the sixth Freddy Krueger movie, what's it called? Not Jason. What's the title? Oh, Freddy's Dead. Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, is really rough. It's a very poor movie. It's not great. And I think Wes Craven, when given the opportunity to make one more, he was looking at that movie and was like, where do we go from here? There's no story.
I remember it. It was a very interesting film when I first saw it.
It hit me at the right time. Like I saw Nightmare on Elm Street 1 first when I was like 10. And then I still remember like at Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, wherever I was. And I came across the copy of Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And I remember just the word new. I was like, oh, cool. He did another one. And, 10, 11-year-old me, whatever I was, watching New Nightmare, I'm like, this is really interesting. Like it's about the real people and how, because the series of movies ended, the essence of Freddy is now being like resurrected into the new world, and it's actually going to affect the people involved with making the movie, which is so cool. And I love that film. I mean, is it super scary? Not really. I mean, there's a couple moments. I love when he comes out of the closet and he says, "Miss me." Like there's some parts that, and I love the look and design of Freddy in New Nightmare. He looks really like creepy, and Craven was always about, okay, my character became farce. He became like this jokester.
Yeah,
he was always supposed to be scary and evil. And he's evil again in New Nightmare. And so there's a lot of horror movie sequels I love, but if I had to pick one, I just think New Nightmare, that's taking a property of something and doing something really new and innovative and ambitious with it. And I love that.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's all I got, John.
Okay.
We have made it to the end. Boy, what a marathon chat we have had about Night of Dark Shadows, about Barnabas and his absence, Quentin and Tracy, and the shenanigans behind the scenes of a certain MGM executive that you will not tell me the name of, who really did his best to butcher this movie. But I still had a good time. I still enjoyed Night of Dark Shadows. Wasn't terrible. I kind of had a good time with it. Recommend you check it out.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So as we come to the end here, Jonathan, anything you'd like to promote or anything you'd like to say to our viewers before we sign off today?
Well, I'd like to thank
or listeners, I should say. It's more listeners than viewers.
Okay. So I'd like to just thank you for being invited back.
For the 50th episode of Film at 50. Can you believe it?
It is such an honor.
We had to go big. We had to go big with the 50th episode. This might be the longest one I've ever recorded. So there you go.
Now we'll have to go for the 100th. We'll have to shoot for that one.
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing the 100. I mean, think about it, Jonathan. I mean, a year. I do a new episode every Friday. It's 52 weeks in a year. So really, it's like every year I'll be on the next 50th. You know,
we might be doing Abominable Dr. Phibes. Returns.
The Dr. Phibes rises again.
Yeah, not rides again.
Or the 100th. Yeah. So the 100th episode would air probably around August of 72. So we'll have to see what movies came out then. I wonder when that came out.
Jessica to death. Let's scare Jessica to death. When did that one come out?
August of 71.
Okay. 71.
Yeah. No, I'm doing an episode. I'm doing that one with my pal Jordan Downey.
Oh, nice.
Horror filmmaker of Thanksgilling and The Headhunter. We did an episode earlier this year on Willard. And
oh, yes. The Rat Boy.
The Rat. Yeah. So that'll be dropping later this month.
Nice.
Let's Scare Jessica to Death. At this moment, I have not watched it yet, but we are recording that in a couple weeks.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm trying to think about other 72 films. Well, there's that Dracula, AD 1972.
The Dracula AD, and is that the last film that Christopher Lee played Dracula in? Might be. It's one of the last two.
It might be.
It's one of the last.
Yeah.
Yeah, 72, I would say the big horror film I know from 72. I mean, there's Tales from the Crypt. I'll probably want to do an episode about that.
Yeah,
that's a fun one.
Yeah.
Wes Craven's Last House on the Left is 72.
Oh,
so we'll definitely
I always think that one is newer.
Yeah, no, that film was 72. And in 2018, I spent about 6 months. I wrote a screenplay about Wes Craven's early filmmaking life, and it's about the making of Last House on the Left. So I know a lot. Cool. I know a lot about that movie.
You are the expert on that
one. And that script has not come to fruition. Maybe I'll read some scenes that episode.
Hey, that would be cool.
It's called Craven. And I sent it out to a bunch of managers, and they all got back to me and said, well, do you have the life rights to this? And I'm like, I have to get life rights? I didn't know what I was just there's so many biopics that come out year to year, right? I'm like,
I know.
If the person has passed away, Wes Craven died in 2015. I wasn't sure kind of how that works. Like, are you allowed to tell someone's story? Even just like a little piece of his life? No? All right. So we'll see. But maybe on that episode next year, I'll read you a couple scenes from the script. It was fun.
That sounds good.
But yeah, maybe we could do that one together. There's a lot of horror titles coming. And then, I mean, for me, like the decade of horror that I love the most, if I had to pick one, is probably the 70s. There's so much cool stuff coming. So there'll be a lot of episodes to do from here on out, Jonathan, and we'll definitely do the Abominable 5 sequel that's coming up here in a few months. So look for that.
Fantastic.
All right. So that takes us to the end. Thanks to you, Jonathan, for being on here today, talking about Night of Dark Shadows. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.